181. Dragon Skin Map. After searching the area for a while, Severus found no sign of any ghost. He did, however, come across a swarm of wild fairies. These magical creatures are found wherever 22s are present. There are many in the Hogwarts grounds. They range from 1 to 5 inches in height, with human-like bodies, heads, and limbs, but a pair of large insect-like wings on their backs, transparent or multicolored. The British Ministry of Magic classifies them as XX. They are harmless and have little intelligence. In most cases, they are treated like small decorative animals. Not only do they not object to it, but because of their extreme vanity, they are quite happy to be used as such. From a 24's making perspective, 31 wings are also a medicinal ingredient. Removing their wings causes no physical harm, only bruises their pride. For these reasons, wild fairies are rarely seen roaming free. Most live in symbiosis with 22ths and are commonly found on magical streets, school lawns, and in the ministry. Seeing the swarm gave Severus an idea. Their intelligence was low, true, but far better than 29's. Fairies are quarrelsome by nature and have their own language, a buzzing sharper than a fly's. Severus did not understand it, but he could view the images of what they had witnessed by tapping their memories. He used some nectar to attract a few, held one in his palm to lick the nectar, and waved his 32 with the other hand. Although they only look humanoid, and in fact 29's are much closer to humans than fairies are, Severus still felt uneasy about harming them. His spell work was careful. He did not kill the fairies, though they would be dazed for 2 or 3 days afterwards. From their memories, he made a discovery. Most fairies do not live past 2 years. One memory showed a newly emerged adult fairy foraging when it saw a flickering ghost drifting southeast. The ghost kept muttering to itself, "It's hiding there. It's hiding there." After that, no fairy had seen her in the vicinity again. Severus released the greedy little things and frowned toward the southeast. That was exactly the direction of Troll Valley. According to the memory, this banshee ghost had wandered that way over a year ago, but Severus had just come from Troll Valley and had seen no black mist or any such ghost. If she had searched that way, had she left the forest entirely, or was she hiding somewhere still? He decided not to pursue further. He needed to return and eat with Harry and the others. He apparated back to the valley. What greeted him was not the lunch he expected. The troll camp was quieter than usual. Lulu was missing. Scanning the surroundings, Severus saw Lulu, Andrews, Harry, and the others by the lakeside about a mile away, doing something he couldn't immediately identify. With a second apparition, he appeared at their side. Lupin was not there, but a conspicuous skull lay on the ground. "What happened?" Severus asked. Harry was already shouting the moment he appeared. "There's a merperson skull in the lake. Lupin and Mr. Andrews think there's a merpeople village under the lake." "I found it! I found it first!" Draco called from the side, eager to take credit. Andrews, who had been waiting with his 32 raised, turned with a surprised look. "I only just found out about this. Lulu and I have lived here with these for over 3 years, and we never thought merpeople could be living under this lake. How could they tolerate these 20s next door?" "Lupin went down?" Severus asked. "Yes," Andrews said. "He used a bubblehead charm and's been under the water for over 20 minutes. Severus patted Andrews on the shoulder. "Take the children back and prepare lunch. Those 29s, without Lulu there, have already started slacking. I'll wait here for Lupin. If anything happens, I'll call." Andrews took Harry and Draco, still reluctant to leave, and carried 2 large buckets of fish back to the camp. Severus stayed behind, waiting for Lupin. He did not have to wait long. About 10 minutes later, Lupin surfaced, still wearing the bubblehead charm. Seeing Severus, he reached out. "Quick, give me a hand." Severus grabbed his arm and pulled him, along with something Lupin was holding, up onto the shore. It was a huge piece of leather, dragon hide. Even at a glance, Severus recognized the tissue. Dragon hide was worth a fortune, and this piece was as large as a rug. "There is a merperson village down there," Lupin said, climbing ashore and slinging a spell to dry his soaked clothes, "but it's full of skeletons, not a single living merperson." "The way they died is strange," Lupin continued. "The village shows no sign of destruction. The skeletons are intact, no obvious injuries from fighting or predators. I found this among the ruins." Severus had spread the dragon hide flat. It looked as though it had been peeled from a dragon's belly. On it, someone had drawn many lines with an unknown pigment. They were not writing so much as a messy map. No annotations, just paths and shapes. In the center was a pattern of two overlapping circles, one large and one small, like a layered cream cake or a fountain seen from above. "What is this?" Lupin asked, peering at the hide. "A treasure map? Is there treasure in this forest?" Severus studied the pattern in the center and said softly, "There are no legends of treasure, but there is a story about the Fountain of Good Luck." Lupin's eyes widened. "The Fountain of Good Luck? You mean the one from the tales of Beetle the Bard?" Severus told him the legend Andrews had mentioned at lunch. Lupin, unsurprisingly, thought the effect sounded like a hyperactive Felix Felicis. "But Felix Felicis, logically," Lupin said, "works by increasing a 22's mental activity and perception, which makes luck more likely. There must be limits. Drink it too often, and the body adapts, and it stops working." Severus rubbed his chin. "I wonder whether the Fountain of Good Luck here is like Felix Felicis, or whether it truly increases a person's luck." Lupin rolled the dragon hide back up. "What shall we do with this hide and the merpeople's remains?" "Either something is wrong with the lake, or something is wrong with the hide," Severus said, looking at the calm water. "A mass merperson death like that wouldn't normally happen, especially after they'd built a village. Let Andrews report the merpeople to the Albanian Ministry of Magic when he has time," Severus continued. "The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures should investigate. As for the dragon hide—" He paused, then looked at Lupin. "Keep it. Even if it has no extra value, a hide this size is worth a lot. It was your find, after all." "Should be called Draco's discovery," Lupin corrected with a smile, unwilling to steal credit from a child. "All right, I'll keep it. Once the 29 house is finished, if Harry and Draco are interested, I'll take them into the forest with this map to look for whatever it points to." "A very good idea," Severus approved. Paris, France, the Flamel cottage. The Flamels were early risers. No matter how late they went to bed, their clocks, kept for nearly a century, woke them at 6. As Mrs. Flamel picked up her 32 to water the garden, she nearly cried out. Something that did not belong in the cottage was sleeping in the corner of the garden. "Nicholas, what's going on? Why is there a dog in our garden?" She hurried inside to where Nicholas sat in a lounge chair, lost in thought. He chuckled. "What was our last pet's name? Alice or Mary?" "Right, it was a snow-white Kneazle. Since it died, we haven't kept any pets for over 80 years. How about this black dog?" Mrs. Flamel breathed a relieved laugh. "If you like it, of course we can keep it, but you should have told me. Seeing such a large dog in the garden gave me quite a fright." "Sorry," Nicholas said. "When I brought it back last night, I told Chimmy, but I forgot to tell you after I woke up." Mrs. Flamel was curious about where he had found it. "Where did you find it? It doesn't look like a stray." "At the Stalingrad metro station," Nicholas said. "It was drinking with a drunkard. I thought it was interesting, so I brought it back." He lifted the day's newspaper. "Let it sleep a bit longer. It drank a lot last night and had to pee 3 times on the way." Mrs. Flamel was already planning supplies. "Then I'll go to Fisher Magical Creature Supplies later for dog food and toys. Should Chimmy build a kennel? It can't keep sleeping outside." Nicholas shook his head. "No need to buy anything." "What will it eat? Where will it stay?" she asked, puzzled. "Just have Chimmy make an extra portion when we eat," Nicholas said. "As for sleeping, this house is so big, except our bedroom, it can sleep wherever it likes." "You're sure it won't make a mess?" "As long as it isn't drunk." Convinced, Mrs. Flamel clasped her hands. "Well, if you're sure, may I make it a couple of outfits? We should welcome it properly." "Of course," Nicholas said. She happily went off to buy clothes for the new member of the Flamel household. After she left, Nicholas rose from his chair and went to his alchemy room. He rummaged through a cabinet and pulled out an embossed book with a 21 on the cover. Anyone who knew their alchemical lore would recognize it, a work rumored to rival the Philosopher's Stone, said to be able to contact any 22 in the world at any time. He set the embossed book on the desk, sat down, dipped a quill into ink, and slowly wrote a name on the first page. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. 182. Take a day off. I'm taking a short break on the last day of the month. There will be one chapter tomorrow at noon and another in the evening. 183. Dragons on a Tour. Black slept until 10 in the morning before he finally woke fully. He stared for a moment at the small, neatly tended garden outside the cottage, dazed. Then the memory of last night snapped back into place. He sat up off the grass and peered into the cottage. A house elf was at work inside. Seeing that no one was paying close attention to him, Black began to fret. He'd drunk a lot the night before and couldn't understand why he'd felt compelled to follow Nicholas Flamel back. As the eldest young master in the direct Black line, Sirius Black knew what Nicholas looked like. In that situation, he couldn't tell if Flamel had deliberately found him or if it had been a coincidence. Staying here was dangerous. If Flamel had found him intentionally, he could be handed over to the Aurors, and the Ministry would be delighted to see him punished, perhaps even sentenced on the spot. Let a Dementor tear out his soul. But if he fled from the Flamels now, he might never learn where Snivelus had taken Harry. After a long, tense moment of weighing risks, Black hardened his resolve and decided to stay. Nicholas hadn't sent him straight to the Ministry when he brought him home last night. Either bringing him back had been a coincidence, or Flamel had other motives. Either way, there was a chance to learn more. Gritting his teeth, Black rose with the stubbornness he was known for, impulsive, reckless, and unwilling to turn back once he'd made a decision. No one could stop him now. The only person who might have, James Potter, was dead. He left the garden and climbed the cottage steps. The house elf glanced up and then returned to its task, as if Black's presence was nothing unusual, a sight that made him think of Creature in his family's old house, that infuriating, fanatically loyal thing. An old, thick voice made him turn. Nicholas stood in the doorway, long silver hair, slightly stooped, wearing a loose robe, looking very old indeed. Black hesitated for only a second. There was no point pretending. Flamel had clearly noticed he was no ordinary animal when he brought him back. Instead of acting like something trying to ingratiate itself, Black fixed Nicholas with a steady, silent stare. "I had Chimmy prepare a bowl of 13 for you in the dining room," Nicholas said. "Drink it after you sober up. It will clear your head." "You agreed to come home with me last night, but you were drunk then," Flamel continued, rolling up a long parchment he'd been writing on. "If you regret it now, you can leave at any time." That sealed it. Nicholas must have some other purpose. He understood Black's unusual nature and had not handed him over to the Aurors. Instead, he was talking to him. Black felt the tension in his chest ease a fraction and stood up, walking toward the dining room to show he would stay. Nicholas didn't follow. He set the rolled parchment aside on a bookshelf and called softly, "Chimmy." The house elf, cleaning a window, blinked up at its master with puzzled, wide eyes. Nicholas smiled and said, "Once you're done downstairs, remember to go up to the attic and tend to the 22 there." "Yes, sir," Chimmy replied without question and went about its task. Nicholas eased back in his chair and murmured to himself, "Just to be safe." His gaze went to the bookshelf and selected a roll of parchment from the very top. The paper flew to his desk and unrolled. A crude map lay revealed, and a mark in the center looked like a two-tiered birthday cake or a fountain from above. Across the valley, excitement swirled for entirely different reasons. When Severus and Lupin came back with the 5 and told Harry and Draco about their discovery under the lake, the two boys lit up. At their age, nothing thrilled them like the promise of adventure. Andrews, the professional adventurer among them, studied the map more critically than the others. "This probably isn't a map of this forest," he concluded. "It looks more like it's pointing to an enclosed space, an underground labyrinth, a karst cave, a mountain cavern. So if we can't find an entrance, the map is useless?" Severus asked. "You can't say that," Andrews replied, handing the 5 back to Lupin. "Even a small hide like this is a kind of treasure." Harry and Draco were even more excited than before. Severus sweetened the deal. Help Andrews build houses for the 27s in the valley, and Lupin would take them exploring with the map. Lunch came and went, and Severus stayed. He knew they couldn't rush. The fairy's clue had said the banshee ghost had come toward the valley. Severus wanted to scout the area first. For the next 3 days, They worked hard on the houses for the 27s. Harry and Draco put aside their rivalry and threw themselves into the work, eager to finish. When 20s build, especially low-tech things like log cabins, they do it fast. In 3 days, they had the basic frames for over 30 large wooden houses, far better shelters than their 27-7's previous huts. During that time, Lupin took the Wolfsbane potion again and successfully transformed while retaining his human mind through the August full moon, proving Severus' potion improvement worked. The improved potion removed the original deadly toxicity while keeping the beneficial effects of the 21 blood itself. After the full moon, Lupin's transformed body was weaker than his normal one, but more than twice as strong as before, and once he'd recovered from the transformation, his pale face looked healthier. Lupin's gratitude towards Severus ran deep. He didn't say much, but the debt was written plainly on his face. On the third day at noon, just as they'd finished the basic frames and were about to start lunch, a huge shadow passed over the valley. Everyone looked up and saw dozens of 21s sweeping across the sky. Some were gargantuan, like mountain ridges dwarfing the 27s below. Others were smaller and agile, but still enormous by human standards. A few even carried 20s on their backs, patrolling the area as they flew east. "Dragons! So many dragons!" Harry cried, breathless. It was his first time seeing live 21s. Draco, who had once visited the 21 Reserve in Romania with Lucius, opened his mouth in surprise. Even he had never seen such a sight. Lupin frowned. The formation and movement of the beasts were atypical. Andrews had raced back to his cottage and returned with a camera, snapping photos excitedly. "It must be the Fire Dragon Nature Reserve, not far from here," he said. "Only that place would have so many 21s. One of the 20s riding a 21 looked down and spotted the group in the valley. The rider nudged his Swedish short snout with a pat, and the pair peeled off from the flock, banking down toward the lake. The dragon beat its wings and landed heavily by the water, sending the Sevings carrying logs into a panicked scatter that raised clouds of dust. "Hi! Hello there!" the rider called, taking off his goggles to reveal sharp Middle Eastern features. "We're patrolling for the reserve's expansion. I heard there was an adventurer in this valley studying the 7 population, but I didn't expect so many of you." 184. Expansion of the protected area. The dragon tamer was in high spirits. He took off his gloves and shook hands with Severus and the others, even greeting Harry and Draco. "Is this a Swedish short snout?" Draco asked, eyes shining as he edged closer to the dragon. "When I was your age, I couldn't even tell a dragon from a lizard." The dragon tamer laughed and praised Draco, noticing the longing in both boys' faces. "Want to pet it? Go on. Don't be shy. The dragons we're allowed to ride are gentle and won't hurt anyone. You can interact with it safely. Just don't touch its nostrils. Sometimes it sneezes, and the heat from a dragon's breath can burn you." Encouraged, Harry and Draco approached the Swedish short snout. True to the tamer's words, the dragon was unexpectedly calm. It watched them approach and then lowered its massive head onto the grass so they could stroke it. At that moment, Andrews caught a phrase the dragon tamer had slipped earlier about patrolling for the expansion of the nature reserve, and his brow tightened. "What does that mean?" he asked. The dragon tamer slapped his forehead as if he'd just remembered. "Ah, sorry, I nearly forgot. I came down to tell you. In 3 days, the Logara Fire Dragon Nature Reserve will be expanding this way. We're designating this entire valley and another 10 kilometers east as new dragon habitat. You'd better move out within 3 days. Migrating dragons get irritable and aggressive. You could get hurt." Severus and Lupin exchanged a look. Both understood the implications immediately. Andrews went pale and stared at the tamer. "Expanding east, including this valley. What about the trolls who live here?" The dragon tamer shrugged. "Nature will take its course. Dragons don't usually go out of their way to harm other magical creatures, but trolls are, well, trolls. They're blunt and provocable. It'll lead to conflict, and the trolls will almost certainly be crushed. If those trolls were rare protected creatures, the ministry might relocate and protect them," he added. "But they're trolls. No one's going to fight to save them." Andrew's face drained of color. He knew, as he told Severus and the others, that most trolls were closer to beasts than people. Simple, instinctive. Only a few, like Lulu, showed anything like human emotion. Still, Andrews had lived among these trolls for 3 years. He'd been the one to ask Severus and the others to help build houses for them before he left Europe. Now, before the houses were even finished, those trolls might be wiped out. Why is the Fire Dragon Nature Reserve expanding all of a sudden? Severus demanded. Wasn't the original area sufficient for the dragons? The dragon tamer's smile faded. We don't want to expand either, but for the past 2 years, something's been happening on the western side of the reserve. 3 dragons have died and 7 injured. The Greek and Albanian ministries have investigated repeatedly without finding anything conclusive. A few days ago, the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures ordered us to abandon the western area and expand east instead. He didn't wait for more questions. Glancing toward the distant cluster of dragons, he called out, "Oh no, I have to catch up with them. Visiting time's up, children. We've got a lot to do today." He gestured for Draco and Harry to step back, climbed onto the Swedish short snout, and warned Severus and the others, "Leave within 3 days. If anything happens or you're attacked by a dragon, send a distress signal into the sky. We'll get there quickly." With that, he urged the dragon into the air. The great beast beat its wings and soared after the others. Harry and Draco, still buzzing with excitement, gaped at one another. "Did you see its nostrils? They could fit my head. And the fire. It's so beautiful, much better than the gray-scaled ones," Draco said. They came back to the adults laughing, only to find the mood had shifted completely. Andrews stood white as chalk, Severus and Lupin hovering beside him with helpless expressions. "What's wrong?" Harry blurted. Lupin told them. When Harry and Draco heard that the reserve was expanding to include the valley, and the trolls living there would almost certainly clash with and be slaughtered by the dragons, their faces went ashen. The excitement drained away like water down a plug hole. How can this happen?" Harry murmured. Draco snapped, "We've been building those houses for nothing." He immediately realized the tone of his outburst and how insensitive it sounded. Under the looks of Harry and Lupin, he didn't want to apologize, and just turned his head away. Severus put a hand on Andrews' shoulder. "What will you do?" Andrews had to shake himself out of his daze. His expression was bleak, and he sighed. "I'm going to tell Lulu. He needs to know what's coming. Once he knows, we'll see what we can do." Lunch tasted of cardboard for all of them, and the house building was called off for the day. Andrews went alone to find Lulu and explain the expansion. Severus, Lupin, Harry, and Draco gathered together. "So is Mr. Andrews going to leave Europe early?" Harry asked. "His research subjects are about to be wiped out. He isn't going to stay and try to make the trolls fight dragons, is he?" Draco snorted. "No one is that stupid. 185, migration plan." The trolls in the valley no longer had to haul those damned logs. They didn't understand why the construction had stopped. They only felt the immediate relief of idleness. Most trolls were content to bask in leisure, ignorant of the long-term consequences. Only Lulu seemed to grasp, in its own clumsy way, what the halt meant. It couldn't fully comprehend what expanding a dragon nature reserve entailed, nor why the expansion was happening, but after years of traveling with Andrews, it understood one thing very clearly. Putting dragons and trolls in the same habitat would be lethal for this tribe. I can't watch Jackman and the others. They'll die here without knowing why." When Severus and the others approached Andrews and Lulu, they heard Lulu's rough, helpless voice. They haven't hurt anyone. They don't deserve it." Andrews rubbed his head and tried to find a solution. "Perhaps you could teach them not to provoke the dragons. As long as the dragon colony isn't disturbed, there shouldn't be any conflict." Lulu shook its small head. No. Jackman and the others are idiots, you understand. Pike and the others, idiots. They won't think the dragons are anything but invaders." Andrews felt stunned. Persuading the Dragon Nature Reserve to retract its plans? The expansion was a decree made jointly by the Departments for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures in Albania and Greece. He couldn't reassign land with a few words, certainly not to protect a tribe of trolls. And yet he couldn't simply abandon them. After 3 years living side by side, and because of his friendship with Lulu, leaving felt like betrayal. Lulu saw his dilemma. Its thinking was rare for a troll. Pike, you don't have to be troubled. I know you can't change it. It's not your fault. But they're my kin, even if they're idiots. If I weren't here, I might just do nothing. But I'm here now. I'll stay with them, spend these last moments with them. It crouched down, trying to be smaller so it could meet Andrew's eyes. I'll keep myself safe. I want to at least do something for my stupid kin. That decided Andrews. He met Lulu's gaze and smiled. I'm glad you didn't tell me to leave first. That would have been an insult, not a kindness. Lulu scratched its bald forehead foolishly. Pike needs my help, and I need Pike. We're friends. Andrews patted its granite-like arm. Yes, we're friends, the only wizard and troll traveling together in the magical world. I'll stay with you, Lulu said. Maybe we can't stop everything, but we can't just watch. Harry watched them with a touch of envy. Their bond is so good. Draco sneered under his breath. Ridiculously stupid. He glanced at Severus. We're not doing anything that foolish, are we? We're leaving this place. You've already learned what you needed from him. Severus looked up at Draco and smiled calmly. Don't worry, we won't stay. Draco exhaled, relieved. Risking himself to help a muggle had been the limit of what he could stomach. The thought of sticking around to fight dragons on behalf of trolls was untenable. Then Severus added, in a way that made Draco pause, because they won't be staying here either. Before Draco could respond, Severus had crossed to Andrews and asked, Why haven't you thought about moving the trolls to another part of the forest in the next 3 days? Andrews, as an expert on trolls, shook his head. They're used to living here. We can't get them to move on their own. If we force them away, they'll return when we leave, and they'll still provoke the dragons. There are only about 30 of them. We could use a memory charm, move them, and then wipe their memory of this place, Severus suggested. Andrews frowned. Troll minds aren't like human minds. A standard memory charm would only reduce them to gibbering idiots. To do it properly, you'd need someone highly skilled. There are only a handful of practitioners in the entire magical world who can perform the memory charm expertly, and we don't have one. Severus's expression became certain. We don't need to find one. One will come to us. Andrews blinked. Where did Severus's confidence come from? Still, the man didn't strike Andrews as a braggart. If Severus was right, a migration plan could actually work. Andrews brightened. Where would we move them? We can't take them too far, but they must be outside the expanded reserve. What environment suits trolls? Severus asked. Like this, clean water, open space. Mountain trolls, forest is fine for them. That fork in the river you showed me a few days ago would do. It's well outside the reserve. There's a big clearing and a reliable water source. Andrews nodded, picturing the advantages. The biodiversity is richer there. Even if Lulu and I leave and they stop tending the yellow-horned goats, they'll be able to find food and survive. Excited, Andrews began pacing. As a specialist, he could work out a concrete plan. These lazy fools won't want to go. We'll have to force them, tear down their shacks, cordon off the lake, dirty the water so they can't drink it, lead the goats to the new site. They've almost forgotten how to hunt. If they stay here, they'll starve. Severus pointed out the clock. We only have 3 days. It's not just moving out of the valley. They must be more than 10 kilometers east to be completely clear of the expanded reserve. The time is tight, Andrews conceded, but he brimmed with energy. From now on, we seize every minute. We must prepare the new tribal site, use the wood we've gathered, move the goats and secure water this afternoon. Tomorrow we force them out and control their movement so they head straight to the destination. He paused, eyes on Severus. But are you sure someone skilled in the memory charm will come? Severus nodded. Write a letter to your cousin with the coordinates of the new site. Don't explain, just the location. Trust me, in a few days, a master of the memory charm will come to your door. Why would he help? Andrews asked. Severus only smiled. Because I said so. He wouldn't give the reason, but Andrews trusted him. He squeezed Severus's hand. I don't know why he'd do it, but thank you. You didn't have to. Harry chimed in, cheerful. This is interesting. We're all in, Lupin smiled. If we pull this off, it'll be great to brag about down at the pub. Draco curled a lip. Bragging to drunks about how foolish we were? They moved quickly. Lupin was sent ahead to prepare the new site and to handle transfer of the yellow-horned goats. Severus and Andrews used the trolls' lazy afternoon nap to take down the wooden shacks and to cordon off the tribe's lakeside, muddying the water. Lulu, true to form, became the messenger, speaking in troll language to explain, as plainly as possible, why they had to leave and what danger waited if they didn't. Harry and Draco were relegated to lighter duties, mapping the fastest routes from the valley to the new site on their flying skateboards. The real relocation would start the next afternoon. Keeping the trolls moving in the right direction would take time. Andrews expected at least a day and a half just to get them completely out of the reserve, with at least one night spent on the road. Harry's flying skateboard skills had improved considerably. He could glide adeptly under 20 meters. Above that, the board got twitchy. It was a flexible, short-range tool, no substitute for a broomstick, but ideal for scouting routes. As they had anticipated, Lulu's earnest announcements fell mostly on deaf ears. The trolls respected Lulu and treated it as a leader, but when survival choices were at stake, their lazy, stubborn instincts prevailed. They refused to move. That left the others no choice but to push them. Soon enough, the trolls discovered their food was gone. Andrews had led the yellow-horned goats out and hidden them in a concealed cave. With no goats and no food, the tribe went hungry. When a few trolls sought water, they found the lakeside, once their lifeline, was muddied and undrinkable. One or two clever ones wandered farther and found a clean source, but most took a mouthful of filthy water, gagged, and spat it back. Just as the hungry and thirsty trolls considered retreating into their homes, hoping everything would be better tomorrow, they realized the wooden shacks were gone. It hadn't rained in days, but Andrews and Severus could manufacture a spectacle. They used water from the lake and a summoning charm to produce small, artificial rain. They couldn't perform large-scale weather magic, but a continuous, drenching shower over the sleeping area was simple enough. That night, the trolls, accustomed to easy food, shelter, and comfort, suffered through cold, hunger, and waterlessness. One by one, the torment proved too much. They finally couldn't take it anymore. 186. Fire Dragon Assault. Tell them, Lulu, if they want to keep their old lives, they must leave this valley right now. Andrews said it sternly. Lulu went over to the cluster of trolls and translated into their language. A dispute immediately broke out among the trolls. Some of them waved wooden clubs in obvious displeasure. Lulu raised its voice, louder and sharper, nearly roaring to drown out the protest. The authority it had built up among these trolls over time did its work. Even the most aggressive troublemakers quieted under its pressure. It was already afternoon. Lupin had finished preparations at the destination and returned to the valley camp. Harry and Draco had scouted the route out of the valley. Now they stood with the rest near the uneasy trolls who were agitated from lack of water and food. At last, under Lulu's direction, the trolls began to leave the valley in a slow procession. Harry led on his mount, Severus and Lupin guarded the left and right flanks, Draco stayed beside Severus, and Andrews brought up the rear to prevent anyone from straying. The forest floor trembled as dozens of trolls marched. Nearby magical and mundane creatures fled in panic. A little chaos erupted as they left the valley. Some trolls dawdled and stopped, forcing Lulu to administer a series of punches and kicks among them. Under that pressure, they moved on, sluggishly but without anyone falling behind or deliberately refusing. By evening, after more than 10 kilometers, they reached the campsite Harry and Draco had chosen for the night. Freed from Lulu's insistence, the trolls collapsed where they stood. When they saw a clear stream, one that fed the valley lake, some of the thirstiest staggered to it and drank. Andrews began releasing a few of the yellow-horned goats for them, preparing a meager dinner. "We mustn't let them eat their fill," he told Severus and the others as the wizards ate. "If they gorge themselves here, they won't want to leave in the morning." Andrews had Lulu promise the trolls a lavish feast when they reached the destination, and he expected that would help them move out smoothly the next day. The day's migration, though bumpy at first, had proceeded well. At their current pace, they would reach their goal by midday. Trolls could sleep anywhere and didn't need cabins or tents. They fell asleep on the grass by the stream. Severus and the others rested in the tent they'd used when they first entered the forest. There was enough room, even with Andrews inside. They couldn't all rest at once, though. Someone had to keep watch. Lulu, Andrews, Severus, and Lupin, one troll and 3 humans, divided the night into 4 shifts. Lulu and Andrews took the first half, Severus and Lupin the second. The 2 children, Harry and Draco, were excused. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, after Andrews woke Severus and they checked the number of trolls sleeping on the ground, Andrews went back to bed and Severus remained alone on watch. Well, not entirely alone. There was the thin, disembodied presence of Ghost Snape hovering nearby. The dragon tamer mentioned unexplained incidents to the west of their reserve, Ghost Snape said in a low voice. Didn't you think it likely those incidents had something to do with the banshee ghost you're searching for? Severus jabbed at the campfire with a stick. I am not that dull. Then why are you still playing house with these trolls? You are impatient, Severus said evenly. The greater the risk and uncertainty, the more reason to be cautious. Your master is in this forest. He cannot get away for a year or 2. He will stay here. Ghost Snape never did understand the source of Severus's confidence, or why Severus and Andrews were so sure Lockhart, the tiresome best-selling author, was a master of memory charms and would find them. But after so many of Severus's predictions had proved eerily accurate, Snape had stopped arguing. Severus turned the conversation to potions and spells with the ghost. They traded theories and observations as the night wore on. Shortly after 3, Severus and the ghost heard a faint roar from the western horizon. Severus cut the discussion short and looked toward the low-hanging moon in the west. A strange crimson hue stained a portion of the sky. Snape heard it too and said, uneasy, "What is that sound?" Before Severus could answer, a roar far louder exploded across the sky like thunder. Almost all the trolls were jolted awake. Severus yanked open the tent flap. "Get up! Everyone up! We have to leave. Now! Move!" Andrews and Lupin stumbled out of the tent in their pajamas, clutching wands. Panic spread through the trolls. Even with Lulu trying to soothe them, the mob was impossible to calm. Above them, blotting out much of the starry sky, loomed the source of the roar, an enormous dragon, nearly 3 times the size of the Swedish short snout that had visited the valley before. Its belly gleamed metallic, the telltale sheen of a Ukrainian iron belly, the biggest dragon in the world. The moment it revealed itself, it let out a roar that made ears ring, and then its fiery breath swept down like divine judgment, engulfing half a mile. "Protego totalum," Severus shouted without hesitation. He plunged his wand into the ground and erected an invisible shield that enclosed them and the trolls. The dragon's fire slammed into the area charm, but could not penetrate it. All around, the forest burst into flames. Grass and trees caught and exploded into light. Andrews shouted, "What's going on? They said the reserve expansion wouldn't start until tomorrow." Lupin reacted swiftly. He pointed his wand at the sky and cast a spell. A cluster of bright red sparks shot upward, exploding into brilliant fireworks against the night thinly lit by fire. Harry and Draco watched in horror. Whatever excitement they had felt at seeing a dragon before had been replaced by raw fear. "Remus, take Harry and Draco. Get them out of here," Severus barked. Lupin didn't hesitate. He grabbed the boys and, while throwing up a shield of his own, ran east. The Ukrainian ironbelly realized its fire had not annihilated them. It spread its massive wings, bared its talons, and smashed its bulk down on the protective dome. Boom! The impact shook everything. The area charm developed countless fine fissures across its surface. The trolls scattered in panic. Lulu tried to force them east, but over 10 of the trolls spun and ran back toward the valley they had come from. "Forget about them," Severus shouted to Andrews, who was trying to round up the stragglers. "Get as many out as you can. Those we can't save, that's just natural selection." Andrews took a steadying breath. He knew Severus was right. They could only do their best and protect themselves. Beyond that, nothing could be done. "Something's wrong," he said urgently. "This timing doesn't match the reserve's expansion, and a captive-bred dragon shouldn't be this aggressive. They've gone mad." "You and Lulu take the trolls and run east as well," Severus ordered. "Protect yourselves above all." "I understand." Andrews didn't waste another word. He used blasting curses on the wildest trolls, detonating small explosions to herd them together and force them eastward. Crack! With a final, terrible concussion, Severus's shield charm reached its limit under the Iron Belly's second assault and shattered. 187. The unusual movements of the dragons. The Ukrainian Iron Belly was now completely focused on Severus. It had singled out who was hindering its destruction, and the moment the shield charm shattered, a dazzling pillar of fire shot from its maw. The woods and grasslands, already alight, were reduced to ash under the inferno. Fortunately, Lupin had already escaped with Harry and Draco, while Andrews and Lulu were driving most of the nearby creatures away from the area. Only a few stragglers trying to flee back to their valley screamed in agony amid the flames. But the Ukrainian Iron Belly did not relax in the least. It had not seen its enemy struggling within the sea of fire. Just as it raised its head, searching the surroundings for Severus's figure, a sudden incantation rang out right above it. Sectum Sempra. In the next moment, the Iron Belly felt a searing pain in its left eye. Though its body was sheathed in dragonhide of extremely high magical resistance, its eyes remained vulnerable. Severus had apparated directly above it and taken his chance. The Iron Belly's left eye was sliced clean in half. Hot dragon blood gushed from the socket. It let out a wretched howl and crashed straight to the ground, smashing a large crater into the earth. It writhed in pain, but Severus was already gone. He hadn't been the only one attacking from the sky. More than a dozen dragons were flying wildly overhead, and in the chaos, 2 of them were heading clearly west. After ensuring the Iron Belly could no longer harm Harry and the others, Severus hadn't planned to deal with the rest. But when those 2 dragons flew over his head, apparently drawn by the commotion of the fleeing creatures, Severus realized he had to stop them as well. This crazed swarm of dragons was attacking indiscriminately. Once they fixed on a target, escape was nearly impossible. Confringo. Just as a Norwegian ridgeback and a Romanian longhorn were about to dive toward the group on the ground, Severus's blasting curse struck their wing bases. Though armored in scales and hide, the base of a dragon's wings is a weak point. Under the curse, the Romanian longhorn roared in pain, and in a pointless reaction, shifted its target to Severus. The longhorn aimed its priceless golden horns at him and dove. After a split second's hesitation, the ridgeback also changed course and breathed a blast of hot flame at Severus. With a single apparition, Severus slipped away from their attacks and materialized behind the ridgeback, grabbing onto its jet-black ridges. The longhorn realized its strike had missed and refocused on Severus, perched on its companion's back. Showing no concern for collateral damage, it immediately angled itself and lunged again at the ridgeback. From the ridgeback's perspective, its companion had vanished, then suddenly chosen to attack it. Enraged, it turned its head and continued to breathe fire at the incoming longhorn. The longhorn, already crazed, hadn't expected a counterattack from its fellow dragon. It abandoned caution, failed to notice Severus was no longer on the ridgeback, and charged straight at it. Fortunately, the ridgeback's body was more agile than the Iron Belly's. It dodged the longhorn's strike while still belching flame. But the grudge between the 2 dragons was now set. They ignored the creatures below and began fighting each other in the sky. With their attention diverted, Severus apparated next to Andrews and began helping him drive the remaining creatures east. Some ran wildly, some attacked the one-eyed Iron Belly, others threw stones at the dragons dueling above. They were incredibly foolish, but any that paused or tried to turn back were driven on by Severus and Andrews. A few grew enraged and tried to counterattack, but Lulu suppressed them. Those who could not be subdued were kicked into the stream by Lulu to fend for themselves. Even Lulu had realized that, for some hopelessly stupid kin, sending them to their deaths was a mercy for everyone. They pressed on. As the sky began to brighten and the sun edged up, they finally forced the creatures past the eastern limit of the ward set by the Albanian ministry. Given the state the dragons were in, crossing that boundary did not guarantee safety, but they continued driving the creatures until the dragon roars could no longer be heard. Then they slowed and regrouped with Lupin and the others up ahead. "What on earth is going on? Who provoked them to make them this crazy?" Harry asked, his voice still carrying fear. The western half of the sky remained crimson. Countless magical and mundane beasts fled eastward from that direction. Severus patted Harry on the back, urging him not to stop and to keep heading east. It might be related to why that ministry was forced to extend the ward. We've suffered an undeserved calamity. We must demand an explanation from the Albanian Ministry of Magic, Andrews said indignantly. This nearly cost us our lives, all because of their mismanagement. Lupin, however, took a more philosophical view. I sent up a signal just now, but no one came. They're likely facing serious trouble themselves and are overwhelmed. Fortunately, no one was hurt. That's the best outcome. After getting away from that pack of frenzied 29s, Severus and the others found the rest of their journey far smoother. Aside from a few other creatures fleeing westward from the nature reserve because of the 29 riot, they encountered no further accidents. A day and a half later, they reached their destination. Lupin had already cleared the area. The logs that had been processed in the valley were moved to this open space by the riverbank, and the herd of yellow-horned goats Andrews had hidden away was now settled in a new fenced enclosure. The trolls, however, were not pleased with their new post. Stupid and stubborn, they refused to leave the comfort of their original territory. Though they sometimes showed cowardice facing a dragon, as long as they weren't under threat from a 29's scorching breath or claws, they felt no instinctive urge to flee. For now, with Lupin's temporary suppression, they could be left here. Whether they would return to their old home to seek death once Andrews and Lupin left would depend on the methods of the memory charm master who would come later. On the second day after they'd settled by the river, while they were helping the trolls finish the houses, 2 dragon tamers from the Logara Fire Dragon Nature Reserve arrived. One, a man with Middle Eastern features, was the same tamer who had landed in the valley on a Swedish short snout and warned them before. The other was a pale, proper European who clearly held a higher position in the reserve. "Was that red spark signal we saw in the early hours 2 days ago sent by you?" the pale man asked nervously as soon as they met. "I am Alak Bagar, Director of the Logara Fire Dragon Nature Reserve Management Office, Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures of the Albanian Ministry of Magic. I am truly sorry for what happened that night," he added, bowing slightly. Andrews set down his tools and scowled. "If your plan was advanced, you should have told us beforehand. That group of frenzied 29s nearly killed us." Barr kept his head low. "I am very sorry, but that night wasn't caused by our expansion schedule being moved forward. Something went wrong with the 29 colony itself. Something to the west affected them, made them run eastward like that. Our people couldn't control them. Even the normally most docile became irritable and aggressive. 2 of our dragon tamers were killed and 6 others injured." The Middle Eastern tamer's expression went dark as he spoke, whether from grief for his colleagues or sadness for its snout wasn't clear. Andrew's tone softened slightly, but he was still angry. "I'm sorry for your losses, but the danger we faced was caused by your negligence. You knew there was a problem to the west, didn't you? You should have controlled those 29s and not let them get loose." "This was our mistake," Bagar admitted. "That is why I came to find you, to apologize, check for casualties, and offer compensation from the Albanian Ministry of Magic." Both Andrews and Severus recognized the real reason behind the apologies. The ministry wanted to find them quickly and seal the matter before the story reached the wizarding press. For a small ministry like Albania's, a scandal on this scale could be catastrophic. Admitting negligence publicly would be unbearable. So they came to apologize and to use compensation and non-disclosure to keep everything quiet. Neither Andrews nor Severus intended to exploit the situation for an exorbitant sum. Andrews asked only for some byproducts from the Fire Dragon Reserve, and Severus requested extra 29 blood. Bagar agreed, then presented a contract demanding that they never leak information to the press or other news outlets, or pay a heavy penalty for breach. Andrews signed without hesitation. As the 2 dragon tamers prepared to leave, Severus stopped Barr with a question. "Can you tell me exactly what happened that night? Why did the 29s suddenly go mad?" Bagar glanced at Lupin and Andrews before answering. After a moment's hesitation, he asked, "May I ask if you were the one who blinded a Ukrainian Ironbelly's eye?" Severus did not deny it. "Do you want compensation?" "No, of course not. Bugar said quickly, waving a hand. You were fully within your rights to defend yourself. We were simply astonished by the power of 34. We rarely see any 34 capable of doing such damage to a dragon's eye. He paid the compliment without realizing the man he was admiring was Severus Snape, the British 2027 who had recently gained a reputation in France for rescuing 13. Out of respect for a powerful 27, he continued. As for the lake, it's not a secret, and we've abandoned that area anyway, 60 kilometers west of the valley where the trolls live. At the former western edge of the reserve, there is a small hill beside a lake. The set sound 29s used to go there to bathe. But starting about 3 years ago, we had incidents where we're mysteriously injured and provoked there. We investigated then, but found nothing. At the mention, both Andrews and Severus remembered the tale of the Goshawk that had fought and fled east. Andrews brought it up, and Bugar nodded. Yes, that Goshawk used to live on that hill. It fought the Ukrainian Ironbelly and ran from the west all the way to the east, showing not a trace of the fear any normal animal would have at seeing a dragon. There was only that one Ironbelly in the reserve, the one whose eye this gentleman blinded. We tried repeatedly to undo the damage, but the spell on its eye was too severe. It was destroyed beyond saving. He returned to the reserve's troubles. After that, more 29s had accidents at that hill and lake, and 2 even died there. After we failed to find a cause, we decided to relocate them. But only 2 days ago, while making final preparations, in the middle of the night, we discovered that all the 29s in the reserve had gathered at the lake to the west. They were clustered there drinking the water, so many that they would have drained it in a single night. We were busy with the expansion and didn't notice until the latter half of the night. By the time we realized, it was too late. All the 29s that drank that water went mad, lost their docility, and attacked any living creature they saw. At first, without preparation, one of our dragon tamers was killed on the spot, bitten to death by the 20 he was usually closest to. The situation spiraled out of control and led to the trouble you encountered. Reinforcements from the Ministry of Magic arrived in the morning, and we finally regained control. He shook his head, still shaken by the memory. Severus asked, "Did you investigate the lake water afterward?" "There was no water left to test," Bugar said, grave. The lake was completely drained, every drop. Even the silt at the bottom was eaten by the 29s. We dissected those that died, but found no abnormalities. The site has now been sealed by the Ministry of Magic. Aurors will take over the investigation. If this was a deliberate act, the culprit will be punished. Having explained the situation, Bugar and his men hurried away. There was much work to do for the newly expanded reserve. When they left, Severus and the others resumed the trolls' construction work. Ghost Snape could see Severus was considering the strange 29 incident and asked, "When do you plan to go over there?" Severus answered softly, "No rush. I'll wait until I've helped Andrews finish here. I trust that with Lockhart's talents, he already knows where the person he's looking for is by now." Albania, Sarande district. Lockhart didn't even look at Angelo, whom he had suddenly stunned and knocked out. He began tearing through the man's suitcase. "This ungrateful idiot," he muttered. "I've been nothing but kind and flattering to you, and you still refuse to tell me where he is. Don't you know how precious my time is? Don't you understand how many fans are waiting for my new book this year? You forced my hand. Someone like you isn't worth taking risks for." He scattered Angelo's belongings until, at the bottom of the case, he found the letter Angelo had received 2 days earlier, the one Angelo had guarded so jealously. Lockhart was certain it had been written by Angelo's explorer cousin. Angelo had been wary because he knew Lockhart wanted that information. Having bided his time and feigned a desire to return to Britain so as to lower Angelo's guard, Lockhart had delivered the final day dinner and used the moment to stupefy him and search his luggage. He tore open the envelope. The letter was indeed from Angelo's cousin, Pike Andrews. It asked why Angelo had not yet come and gave Pike's new coordinates in Logara National Forest Park, his new address. A bright, slightly sinister smile spread over Lockhart's face. "Ha! I finally found you, Pike." He tossed the letter into a nearby fireplace and watched it burn, then used a memory charm on the unconscious Angelo, crafting a pleasant memory of a cordial dinner and a drunken farewell. Satisfied, Lockhart picked up his suitcase, apparated to the nearest wizarding tavern, and used the Flu network to reach a location near Logara National Forest Park. Humming a happy little tune, he strode into the forest. 189. Lockhart's Forest Adventure. Even with the coordinates Andrews had sent and a map of Albania he'd bought at a wizarding tavern, Lockhart found it difficult to locate his destination in a forest as vast as Logara. He was a fake adventurer, with no real experience in the wilds and poorly prepared before he entered. On the very first day, he got hopelessly lost. Although he had once been a gifted Ravenclaw student, so many years had passed since graduation that most of the skills he'd learned had grown rusty. He fumbled spells like a Hogwarts junior. Just as with his ambush of Angelo, had he not caught Angelo off guard at the dinner table, even two Lockharts might not have beaten him. Lockhart depended on tricks rather than true competence. Now, lost in the woods, he had no idea where he'd ended up. Still, his mind worked. From the map he deduced that Andrews's location should be beside the forest's main river. The moment he realized he was lost, he decided his priority was to find water. Tributary or main branch, if he found and followed any stream, he would eventually discover his position. He overestimated himself. He searched until nightfall without finding even a trickle of river. Exhausted, Lockhart collapsed on the grass. A bold squirrel hopped onto his head before scampering away. He'd brought no tent, only some bread and water, and was beginning to feel discouraged. He considered returning to the tavern for the night and coming back with proper supplies, but his lack of confidence in apparition made that unappealing. Since fame, most of his travel had been by Flu network. He had barely apparated since leaving Hogwarts. The few times he had been impatient and apparated, 2 of those attempts had resulted in splinching, fortunately only costing a limb each time because he'd been able to get to St. Mungo's to have himself reassembled. It had been luck. If his next splinch had severed his head in the middle of nowhere, there would be no saving him. When he left Angelo's house, he apparated in a daze of excitement and had only later realized how risky it was. Now he was loath to apparate in and out of the forest. A cold breeze woke him. He set his jaw and pushed himself up. If he failed to find Andrews, his plan to publish a new book in the latter half of the year would be ruined and his reputation would suffer. He could not afford to stop now. But how to find the right path? After a long pause, he remembered a simple direction spell, one that had been easy at Ravenclaw, but which he wasn't sure he could still cast cleanly. He steadied his wand on his palm and chanted, "Point me." The wand whirled like a compass for several seconds before settling with its tip pointing in one direction. By the spell's nature, it should indicate true north, but Lockhart wasn't confident the casting had been perfect. Treating the result as if it were correct, he consulted his map. The river on the map ran along the forest's eastern side. Confirming where north lay, he turned toward the east and set off. He walked stubbornly for 2 days. At last, he reached what looked like the magical creatures nature reserve established by the Albanian Ministry of Magic. Traces of magical beasts replaced ordinary wildlife. The change lifted his spirits. He checked the map again, convinced he'd been heading east, and triangulated his location from where he'd entered the reserve. According to the markings, a fire dragon reserve lay ahead. Beyond it, a valley housed a troll tribe, and following the valley's stream would lead him to the forest's main river. With a plan, Lockhart felt newly motivated. He slept beneath a large tree and then continued east. The deeper he went, the fewer magical creatures he encountered, not more. He convinced himself this was normal. He saw nothing wrong with approaching the fire dragon reserve alone, until he reached a low hill beside a huge, deep pit. The hill was only 100 or 2 meters high and sparsely vegetated. From a distance, it was little more than a barren mound. The pit, however, looked like a dried-up lake, its bed cracked and baked as if enormous jaws had devoured the water. Curious, Lockhart walked around the dry lake, imagining how he might weave it into a dark lair in a future book. Under a massive dead fir, he meant to rest and eat, and then noticed something glinting in the parched grass. A rusty copper object buried in the mud, only a fingernail's worth exposed. If he hadn't turned his head, he would have missed it. After finishing his bread and water, he cleared the dead grass, dug away the mud, and revealed a round, rusted copper handle. With a minor charm, he swept the remaining dirt aside and uncovered a hidden trapdoor. His eyes brightened with the thrill of discovery and immediately filled with suspicion. As a known fraud with no real adventurous skill beyond the occasional memory charm, Lockhart recognized his own limitations. If danger lay behind that door, he did not trust himself to deal with it. So he replaced the dirt, hid the trapdoor with the grass, and made a mental note of the location. He would let some other fool open it later, and if treasure was found, he would set an ambush to take it. He skirted the dried lake and moved past the low hill, and then stopped. The crest was littered with carcasses. Not just ordinary animals, but magical creatures. Bandamans, chameleons, porlocks, tree monkey frogs, and even piles of dead puffskines. The sight chilled him. He hurried on, but before he had gone more than a few paces, a blinding scarlet light struck him square in the chest. Panic flared. He had always been the ambusher, never the ambushed, and now he stood rooted as the effects of a petrificus totalis seized him. He could only stiffly watch as over a dozen wizards in auror robes stepped from the trees. Someone cast a binding charm and cords wrapped around him. Another pair of hands took his wand. Only when his wand was gone was the full-body bind released. The lead auror looked him over with cold eyes. "Start talking. What have you been doing in this area?" The first question was asked in Albanian, and Lockhart was bewildered. "What are you talking about? I don't know anything. I don't play dumb. Since the Dragon Riot, you're the only one who's come through here. You must be involved with the anomalies." The auror switched to English, his face dark with irritation. His men had only spotted a wizard on the hill and had failed to detect anyone entering the cordon earlier. The fact an intruder had slipped by made him furious and suspicious. The other aurors searched Lockhart's suitcase thoroughly, while a female auror kept studying his face with a puzzled look. "You'd better tell us everything now," the leader said, "or we'll take you back to the ministry and administer veritaserum." Lockhart's panic turned genuine. "I truly don't know anything. I am Gilderoy Lockhart, the famous British author. Does no one here recognize me? I'm not a dark wizard. I came to this forest to find a friend." The aurors continued to rifle through his things and produced a pile of convincing evidence. Every book he'd written, his Order of Merlin, third-class medal from the British Wizengamot, a Most Charming Smile award from Witch Weekly, fan letters, even a Muggle plane ticket from France to Albania. The female auror's expression shifted suddenly into recognition. "Gilderoy Lockhart, yes, Captain, he's my idol. I've read every one of his books. He's a famous British adventurer and author." She brightened. "You came to explore, right? You wrote to your fans that you'd publish a new book in the latter half of the year. Are you looking for inspiration?" Her excitement died at the captain's stiff look. The aurors didn't drop their suspicion because of a suitcase, though. They tested him thoroughly, making him drink potions to rule out polyjuice transformations and otherwise examining him. When the checks came back negative, the captain's posture eased, and he offered a grudging apology. "This was an operational mistake by my subordinates," he said. "They should have stopped you before you entered the cordon." His tone carried more irritation at his team than contrition toward Lockhart. With a few curt orders, he redeployed his men and strode off, cursing. Only the enthusiastic female auror remained, eyes shining. "Mr. Lockhart, could you sign my robes? I've bought every one of your books. I'm a loyal fan." Lockhart flashed his practiced smile and produced a quill. "Ah, of course. That's no problem at all." 190. Meet Gilderoy Lockhart assumed, as ever, that adoration came with his name. He obligingly signed the female auror's robe, where she asked, then, curiosity overcoming him, probed, "What's going on here? Why so many people guarding this place?" The auror, still flushed from meeting her idol, straightened quickly when she heard the question. She glanced toward her superior, who was still visibly annoyed, and said apologetically, "This is a classified operation. I can't say." Lockhart's pride pricked, but he knew better than to push an auror. He recovered his grin instantly. "Ah, of course. Secrets. It would be improper to know. Besides," he added in that oily, theatrical tone, "if I learned anything, I might be tempted to work it into one of my adventure books." She laughed, and Lockhart seized the chance to ask the important question. "I've been in this forest for days. I'm looking for a friend, Pike Andrews, troll expert, adventurer. I came to find him." The name made the Auror pause as if it rang a bell. "A troll expert? I think I've heard that name mentioned at the Dragon Nature Reserve. Wait here, I'll inquire." Her response was a relief. After roughing it in the woods, Lockhart did not want to dawdle. She went off briefly and returned looking a little chastened, as if she'd been rebuked. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lockhart. There was a very troublesome incident at the reserve, and the dragon handlers are swamped. Even if they know where Mr. Andrews is, they can't escort you." She brightened. "But I can apparate you nearby. I haven't been to the river fork where your friend is, but when I first came into this forest, I visited a small waterfall not far from there. I can side-along apparate you to it." Lockhart's face lit up. Even getting close was something. Side-along was preferable to attempting it himself. No risk of splinching. "You're a lifesaver. Thank you." "If it helps you finish your next book, then it's my honor," she said, and touched his arm. In a blink, they were at a small waterfall on the reserve's eastern side. She dropped him there, showed the spot on a map, and gave directions. "Follow the stream east from this waterfall. After about 10 kilometers, you'll reach a fork in the river. That's where your friend should be." She left quickly, work pressed, and Lockhart did not linger. He set off east along the river, the fatigue of days outdoors forgotten. It took half the afternoon, but before sunset the trees opened, and he found a large clearing at a river fork. Human structures rose from the wild, a row of oversized log cabins, each at least 20 feet tall, like two-story buildings. A few bulky figures sprawled lazily by the water, as if they'd just finished labor. Near the cabins, a short, stocky wizard was tending a fire. Lockhart's excitement flared. He strode from the trees and called out, "Pike! Pike!" Because of the dragon attack during the migration, not all 30-odd trolls had made it here. That had lightened the task of rebuilding homes. After 5 days' labor, they had completed cabins for the 21 trolls now in the clearing. Many of the trolls, however, were restless. A few days after escaping the dragons, they already yearned to return to the valley they remembered. Only the presence of Lulu, someone who could calm them, kept them from running back towards certain death. Andrews worried that if he and Lulu left, the trolls would flee again. He had been asking Severus every day when the memory charm expert they expected would arrive. Severus, Lupin, Harry, and Draco were packed and waiting on a little rise north of the camp, hidden in dense trees where they could watch the clearing without being seen. When the cabins were finished, Severus had told Andrews, "If the person I mentioned comes in from the Far East, he'll probably get here tonight. If he gets lost, he'll find this place by tomorrow at the latest." Andrews had looked puzzled. "You're leaving?" "We aren't leaving the area," Severus said. "But if the man sees me, he may bolt. We'll keep back and let him come." He smiled slightly at Andrews. "Do as I tell you. Trust me, he'll help you, and willingly." Severus had explained to Andrews how to behave when Lockhart arrived. Then they took their positions. Lupin, Harry, and Draco were baffled by Severus's certainty that the pompous writer who had been pestering Angelo was both a memory charm expert and someone who would want to help Andrews. On the slope, Harry asked, "Mr. Andrews only told his cousin his new address. Why are you so sure Lockhart will know where he is?" Draco folded his arms. "I didn't see Angelo giving the address to that showy wizard." Severus grew blunt. "Angelo wouldn't tell him the address. Lockhart will get it from Angelo by other means. He'll steal it." Lupin was taken aback. "Really? He'd steal? Wouldn't he be terrified of the damage to his reputation if it came out?" Severus looked at him. "Why else has Lockhart stuck to Angelo so persistently? What did he say he wanted this time?" Harry, fingers counting, supplied the evidence. "His next book is about trolls, so he wants an expert like Andrews for research." "Then think about what his earlier books are about," Severus prompted. Harry rattled off titles he'd heard on the plane. "Break with a Banshee," "Gadding with Ghouls," "Holidays with Hags." Lupin's eyes went wide as he put it together. "You mean?" Severus's tone was flat. "Exactly. Lockhart's so-called adventures aren't his. He never had those experiences, never fought those creatures. He has been taking other people's stories, attacking the real adventurers, obliterating their memories with memory charms, and then passing off the tales as his own. Harry's outrage was immediate. That's stealing. No, robbery. It's what bandits do. Draco stared at Severus. Do you have proof? Severus only nodded toward the clearing. Wait. Once he finds Andrews, you'll see the proof for yourselves. As the light drained from the sky, the man himself arrived. Lockhart staggered into the clearing in his purple robes, looking rumpled as if he'd not bothered with grooming for days. He called from the woods in that familiar theatrical voice and ran forward, suitcase in hand. Andrews, practical and unused to wizarding fashion, did not recognize him. Ha, Pike! You were hard to find. Pike Andrews, right? Lockhart was breathless and eager. Andrews, not knowing who he was, answered cautiously, I am Andrews, and you are. Gilderoy Lockhart. Lockhart boomed, seizing Andrews' hand with fervent charm. 5-time winner of Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile, Order of Merlin, 3rd class, Britain's best-selling adventure novelist, and an honorary member of the Dark Forces Defense League, Gilderoy Lockhart. Andrews only took from it that the man claimed to be some sort of adventurer. Lockhart pressed on. Angelo's a good friend of mine. I'm working on a book about trolls, and Angelo said you're the foremost troll expert in Europe. He sent me to consult with you. He stepped side to side, peering for any reaction. Andrews met his stare without wavering. Is there something on my face? Lockhart asked, self-consciously. No, of course not, Andrews said. He was not being awkward out of rudeness. He was following one of Severus's key instructions for dealing with Lockhart. Never turn your back on him. 191. Memory modification. Then why have you been staring at me? Lockhart found Andrews' reaction odd, but didn't dwell on it. Andrews waved it away with a few perfunctory words. Just being polite. When someone talks to you, you should look them in the eye. It makes you seem sincere. That sounded reasonable enough, and Lockhart returned to his enthusiastic chatter, telling Andrews about his good relationship with his cousin Angelo and how they'd traveled together in Albania. After receiving Andrews' letter, Angelo had been called away on other business and asked Lockhart to come and greet Andrews for him. Lockhart, eager to charm, wandered through the camp and took in the row of new wooden houses. All these houses? Did you build them? Lockhart's face lit up with genuine admiration. Before Severus left, he had clearly warned Andrews not to tell Lockhart anything about them, so Andrews merely nodded. Yes, with Lulu's help, I organized this group of trolls and helped them build these houses. Lulu? Lockhart's smile was curious, but his eyes glittered with a deeper hunger. Is that the troll Angelo mentioned, the one who traveled around Europe with you? Andrews had already called Lulu over and introduced the troll to Lockhart. Lulu scratched its head and, having been warned not to talk much, kept its responses brief. Night fell and Andrews' dinner was ready. He invited Lockhart to eat with him, and Lockhart gladly accepted. He wasn't in a hurry to make his move. Memory charms were his specialty, but even they weren't as direct as legilimency for prying into a person's mind. He planned instead to coax Andrews into telling him the full catalog of his adventures, enough stories to make material for a book. And only then, with a surprise obliviate, erase Andrews' memory and weave in a different history. During dinner, Lockhart worked at building rapport, claiming his own significant achievements in troll research. Andrews, however, was no fool. A few sentences were enough for him to judge Lockhart's level. The man was full of bluster. That lowered Andrews' opinion considerably. Lockhart didn't seem to care. He begged Andrews to tell him how he met Lulu, how they traveled through Europe, and all the adventures they'd had. Andrews' guard went up. Lockhart's casual requests were exactly the sort of things Severus had warned him about, and Andrews knew how to handle them. He organized his words and began, starting with how he met Lulu in Norway. Lockhart was instantly excited, and midway through Andrews' first story, reached into his suitcase and drew out a thick notebook and a quill, a quick quotes quill that wrote on its own. Don't mind if I record some of the best bits, do you, Pike? He said, using the name he'd already taken to calling Andrews. You know I'm a talented writer. These experiences could become great material. Of course, I'll credit you and sort out the copyright beforehand. Andrews didn't really grasp the modern notion of copyright. He was an adventurer, not a publisher, and paid little attention as Lockhart's quill began to scratch away. As Andrews described how Lulu had saved him and how they discovered the strange nature of the lake, Lockhart grew increasingly animated. It was a perfect opening, no heavy embellishment needed. But just as they reached the moment when Andrews and Lulu, man and troll, prepared to track down a dark wizard's lair, Andrews stopped. Lockhart, ravenous for the conclusion, felt like someone who could smell food but not taste it. "Why did you stop? Pike, what happened next? Where did you find that dark wizard? How did you catch him?" Andrews deliberately left him hanging. "Don't be impatient, Mr. Lockhart. Why don't you hear some of the other adventures Lulu and I had? The next one is even more exciting and dangerous. I remember it was in Iceland." He slid smoothly into the second story. Lockhart bristled at first, but Andrew's new tale soon recaptured his attention, and the quick quotes quill raked across the paper. Yet again, at the crucial moment, Andrews broke off. Lockhart could no longer tolerate it. "Pike, you can't tease me like this. I'm a good listener, aren't I? Tell me the whole story, not just the cliffhangers." Andrews watched him for a moment, then used the words Severus had taught him. "You are indeed a very good listener, Lockhart. I would love to tell you the whole story, but I've run into a problem I need help with." Lockhart wasn't a fool. He sized up the meaning. "What do you want me to help with?" Andrews regarded him earnestly. "You're a celebrity in Britain, aren't you?" "Of course." Lockhart accepted the flattery with relish. "I'm a recipient of the Order of Merlin, 3rd class, a best-selling author, an honorary member of the Dark Arts Defense Association. I know many powerful wizards." Andrews's flattery pleased him. "Ah, you're not wrong. Albus Dumbledore treats me as an honored guest. The Minister of Magic invites me to gatherings, and there's Severus Snape. He's been making waves recently. Our relationship is excellent. He even took my advice to heart." At the mention of Severus, Andrew's expression shifted subtly. He scrutinized Lockhart and mentally catalogued the boastful man before him. Lockhart's bluster fit a pattern. Smooth talk, no drafts required. But Andrews still pressed on. "Could you help me find a wizard who is proficient in memory charms? Not necessarily someone at Dumbledore or Severus Snape's level, just an expert on memory charms." Lockhart's face changed, just a little. He stared at Andrews, taking him in. Andrews looked open and steady under the gaze. There had been no rumors tying him to Lockhart before. This request could be a coincidence. Relaxing, Lockhart smiled. "What do you need a memory charms expert for?" Andrews pointed to the trolls, now full from their meal and dozing in the new wooden houses. "Because the Fire Dragon Nature Reserve has expanded, I moved them out of the valley, but they're not bright. They keep trying to go back and compete with the dragons for territory. I want someone to erase their memories of the valley home." "Wouldn't an ordinary obliviate do?" Lockhart asked. Andrews shook his head. "Troll brains aren't like ours. They're small. A normal memory charm would just stupefy them into idiots. You need a specialist." Hearing this, Lockhart's concerns evaporated. His smile grew broader, genuine with opportunity. "Then you've come to the right man, Pike. No need to look further. I'm an expert in memory charms." Andrews still watched him with a sliver of doubt. Lockhart had been boasting all evening, but Lockhart flashed a confident smile. "You can doubt me in other things, but not this. I can show you." He stood, eager to demonstrate. Together they entered one of the wooden huts. The trolls slept on hay, not beds. The houses provided shelter from wind and rain, nothing more. "Do you want me only to erase their memories of the valley, or should I weave in other memories? It would be better if they always believed they'd lived here since they were born." "That would be perfect," Andrews said. Lockhart raised his wand. "That's simple." He aimed at the troll's small head and intoned, "Obliviate." The spell flowed steady and true. The troll grunted and shifted in its sleep. Its big feet rubbed together. It rolled over. For 20 minutes, Lockhart worked, carefully erasing the memory of the valley and crafting a new set of childhood memories of riverside grassland. When he finally lowered his wand, he announced, "Success!" Andrews, half believing, half unsure, called Lulu and had the troll roused. Lulu slapped it lightly and asked questions in Trollish. The troll, grumpy at first, soon answered docilely. As Andrews had requested, it no longer remembered ever living in a valley. It only believed it had always lived by the river. Both Lulu and Andrews were thrilled. Only after that test could the relocation be considered complete. Andrews lavishly praised Lockhart. Lockhart, who had long been insecure about his abilities and had rarely demonstrated his memory charms in front of outsiders, felt a unique burst of elation at the compliment. But he hadn't forgotten his true objective. Andrews, chest puffed with relief, promised that if Lockhart would alter the memories of all 20 or so trolls in the camp, he would recount all his European adventures in full. That promise set Lockhart buzzing with anticipation. That very night, he worked on the memories of 5 more trolls before finally resting, as Andrews had arranged. 192. Night Raid. Early the next morning, Andrews repaid Lockhart for his help the previous night by finishing the story of his and Lulu's encounter in Norway. He told the whole thing and let Lockhart record it in full. Lockhart grew even more enthusiastic about his work. Without being prompted, he began using the memory charm on the other trolls after breakfast. It was hard work. 1 or 2 trolls would have been easy, but addressing more than 20 in succession wore him down. There were 21 trolls by the river. After Lockhart had dealt with 5 the night before, 16 remained. He worked steadily all morning and completed the memory modifications on another 8. By noon, he was exhausted, collapsing onto the grass, spent both physically and mentally. The memory charm taxed the body and the mind. Andrews was surprised by Lockhart's dedication. He still didn't understand the man's motives, but his impression of the famous author, which had been poor at first, improved somewhat. That change showed up at lunch. Andrews prepared a grand meal for Lockhart, as generous as when Severus and the others visited. At lunch, like the night before, Andrews told another tale. The exhausted Lockhart suddenly brightened, more energized than if he had drunk a powerful potion. Andrews worried Lockhart might overexert himself and suggested he take the afternoon off and finish the rest the next day. Lockhart refused. He wanted to complete all the trolls' memories today, partly to hear every one of Andrews's adventure stories, and partly because he had other plans. "Pike, do you know about the Fire Dragon Nature Reserve to the west?" he asked. Andrews nodded. "I know it. The expansion of that reserve is why Lulu and I were forced to move here with this group of trolls." Lockhart lowered his voice and leaned in. "I came through the west to find you. At the old site of that reserve, there's a small hill and a strange, dried-up lake. There are a lot of aurors guarding it." Andrew's eyebrows rose. He hadn't expected Lockhart to be so bold. From their conversations over 2 meals, he'd learned that this wizard who called himself a professional adventurer hadn't made any proper preparations. He'd simply plunged into the forest. To have broken into an abandoned reserve was brazen. The dragon tamers expanded the reserve because something happened there that they couldn't investigate properly, Andrews explained. That's why the aurors cordoned it off. An accident? Lockhart's eyes lit up. What kind of accident? Andrews hesitated. He'd agreed with the Albanian Ministry of Magic not to disclose details, so he spoke vaguely. It has to do with those incidents. That place is no longer suitable for dragons to live in. Lockhart heard the restraint and only grew more certain something valuable was hidden there. He still remembered the chest beneath the withered fir tree between the hill and the dried-up lake. He hadn't dared explore it alone. Now he had his chance. "I found something odd there," he said, glancing around. "The Albanian aurors don't even know I went into their restricted area. Right by that dried-up lake, under a tree, there's a chest with a copper handle. There must be something wrong under that chest. It might even be the reason the dragon tamers expanded the reserve," he added, inventing his own logic. "Dragons like treasure, right? There's probably treasure underground. The aurors don't know about it. Once we finish with the trolls' memories, how about we go treasure hunting under that chest?" Andrews didn't react with excitement. He shook his head firmly. "Thank you, but since the Albanian Ministry of Magic has cordoned it off, it's an illegal site. I have no interest in that kind of treasure, and I won't break a country's laws for a tasteless adventure." Lockhart inwardly cursed Andrews for his scruples. Andrews valued his research and the trolls who had helped him. If meddling in the reserve would make the authorities hostile to the trolls, Andrews would not risk it. Lockhart considered him naive and unsympathetic, but he kept his face pleasant. He needed Andrews to remain cooperative until he had recorded every adventure. Feigning admiration, Lockhart made a show of praising him. "Pike, there are hardly any men in this world as sincere to their friends as you are, especially when your friends are trolls. People don't even see them as fully human. That's precious." Andrews blushed, waved him off, and said it was nothing. After lunch, Lockhart rested only briefly and then resumed work more vigorously. He completed the memory modifications on another 5 trolls that afternoon. During that time, 2 trolls began fighting, apparently because their experiences didn't match when they communicated, before the problem was smoothed over. By evening, Lockhart was spent and collapsed into the bed Andrews had prepared, leaving the final 3 trolls for tomorrow. Andrews' opinion of Lockhart shifted. The author's boastfulness no longer seemed so bad beside his willingness to toil for a stranger. Andrews' initial wariness eased. The next morning, after the hearty breakfast Andrews prepared, a refreshed Lockhart finished the last 3 modifications. Andrews and Lulu could now move on in peace. True to his promise, Andrews spent the afternoon by the river with Lockhart, recounting his experiences and adventures across Europe, while Lockhart's quick quotes quill scribbled so fast one nib snapped. Fortunately, Lockhart had spares and replaced it at once. They talked until dusk. By the time Andrews finished all his stories, the trolls had retreated to their huts to sleep. Lockhart examined a notebook filled with notes and grinned, praising Andrews unstintingly. Andrews let down his guard. Perhaps Severus's dislike of Lockhart had been merely prejudice. This wizard, it seemed, could be decent. "It's late. Let's stop for tonight," Lockhart said, standing and stretching. Andrews agreed. He paused, then added, "Although I won't join you exploring that abandoned reserve, I can ask someone else. Maybe he'll be interested." "Oh, an adventurer," Lockhart brightened. "He's more professional and powerful than an ordinary adventurer," Andrews said, recalling Severus' advice. "Let me contact him and see if he's willing. If he is, I'll introduce you." Lockhart feigned interest, but he didn't care to wait on Andrews. He was Gilderoy Lockhart, one of Britain's best-known figures. Ordinary people would beg to adventure with him. Still, he kept his smile. They retired to beds separated only by a curtain in the small hut. Andrews fell into a deep, wonderful dream. He and Lulu, leaving the forest and heading to Egypt to explore ancient tombs where they discovered mummy trolls. In the dream, he somehow fell under a curse and was wrapped tight in mummy bandages, even his mouth, ears, and eyes sealed. He wanted to shout for Lulu but could not. Then he woke with a start. In the dim night, a figure stood by his window, wand raised. Moonlight slid across the intruder's face. Andrews recognized that grin full of white teeth. But tonight, the smile had lost its charm and looked vicious. Andrews tried to move and couldn't. His body felt like stone. Lockhart had taken advantage of his sleep and cast Petrificus Talus. It was the most basic of spells. No wizard could botch it. Andrews was completely at Lockhart's mercy. Outside came the trolls even snoring, Lulu among them, fast asleep and unaware. Andrews met Lockhart's eyes as the man laughed triumphantly. "Thank you for your hospitality these past 2 days, Pike," Lockhart said. "To be honest, the other adventurers I met weren't nearly as troublesome as you. They were always keen to show off their stories. You're the first one who actually used it to make demands." He pointed his wand at Andrew's head. "From tonight on, this story will no longer belong to you. After this, you won't even remember you once knew a troll named Lulu. I'll erase that idiot troll's memory too. In the future, there will only be one adventurer who traveled with a troll, only me, Gilderoy Lockhart." Obliviate. Just as Lockhart began the incantation, a red light suddenly struck him from outside the window. Lockhart didn't even have time to react before the spell hit him. At first, he thought his tongue had slipped and he'd failed to cast the memory charm, until he tried to recite it again and wave his wand and discovered his body was frozen in place, utterly immobile. Panic seized him. This was nothing like the last time he'd been ambushed by Albanian aurors. He was in the middle of attacking a wizard. Whoever had cast that spell on him had seen through him. His greatest secret, the source of his fame, had been exposed. While Lockhart trembled with fear, Andrews, lying on the bed, felt an enormous relief. The tension and helplessness that had gripped him for days seemed to lift. Footsteps rushed outside the small cabin. the door was shoved open and several people came in. Lockhart squinted, trying to make them out. 4 figures emerged. 2 large, 2 small, all blurry in the dim light. Someone spoke. I never thought his fame came like this. It's worse than theft. What a hypocritical liar, and yet an idol to so many wizards. The voice was a boy's, and impossibly familiar to Lockhart, as if he had only just heard it. Cold sweat drenched Lockhart's back. He realized, with a sinking dread, that he had walked right into a trap. Another boy's voice added, if the magical world found out what he'd done, everyone would hate him. Someone lit a candle, and the little cabin brightened enough for Lockhart to see faces. When he saw Severus Snape, his heart lurched. Petrificus Tallus still held him stiff, preventing speech, but his terrified eyes betrayed everything. He had not expected Snape to be lying in wait for him. Severus glanced at the stunned Lockhart, then tapped Andrews with his wand and released the Petrificus Totalus. You've spent too much time in the mountains and forests, Pike, he said. Dealing with trolls every day has dulled your vigilance towards strangers. Over the past 2 days, Severus and the others had watched Andrews fall into Lockhart's verbal traps. At first, Andrews had remembered Severus's warning and stayed on guard, but he had quickly come to believe Lockhart's lies, losing all suspicion. If Severus and the others hadn't been here tonight, Lockhart would have succeeded. Andrews sighed, not angry so much as disappointed, and stared at the bound, panting man. I agreed to tell you those stories, he said. Even if you wrote them into a book, I wouldn't have minded. I would have been glad that more people in the magical world learned about trolls. Why did you insist on taking those stories for yourself? There was no shame or irritation in Lockhart's eyes, only pleading. Lupin had already taken the wand from Lockhart and used a binding charm to tie it to his wrist, then conjured a rope to secure him. Severus stepped closer and removed the petrification from Lockhart completely. I beg you. Lockhart dropped to his knees, clasping his hands together in an exaggerated display of humility. Please forgive me, Pike. I was only overcome. Honestly, I still consider you a true friend. I never meant to hurt you. And besides, I helped you these past few days. I helped fix those trolls' memory problems, didn't I? I was useful. Pike, forgive me. I beg you. Andrews said nothing. He stood up in his pajamas, looking at Lockhart with disgust. I'm going out for a walk, he told Severus, clearly not wanting to see the man's face any longer. Severus patted his shoulder in understanding and let him go. Left alone with Severus Snape, Lockhart felt panic spike. He was clever enough to know whom to beg first. If Andrews had been softened, perhaps Lockhart could still turn things around. Now, with Andrews gone, he had to switch targets. Senior Snape, I never offended you. I've always admired you. I looked up to you. When we were at Hogwarts and you were humiliated by Potter and his lot, I wanted to stand up for you. I'll swear it. Everything I said is true. At the name Potter, Harry's head snapped up. He had learned from Severus about the old grudge against his father, but never the full story. Lockhart's words implied something different, that it was Harry's father who had done the bullying. Lupin's face tightened, complicated, but he didn't look at Severus. He looked straight at Lockhart, as if seeing through his showmanship to the manipulative core beneath. Severus allowed a faint, dry smile. You were so sympathetic to me back then, Lockhart. I had no idea. Lockhart nodded eagerly, like a bird pecking for seed. Yes, if I could go back, I'd take your side openly. Senior Snape, please, let me go. I haven't done that much wrong, have I? I only borrowed others' experiences. From another angle, I was promoting their wonderful stories, bringing them to the public. Isn't that a good thing? Draco's scorn grew. He had never seen anyone so shameless. Severus, however, was calm. Your stories are fake and stolen, but the best-selling books in the magical world were written under your name, he said. You are talented, Lockhart, but why resort to theft? You could have done the right thing. You promised Pike you'd help to write those stories with the actual protagonists. You could have achieved real success that truly belonged to you. Lockhart sagged, hearing the finality in Severus's tone. There was no way to wiggle out. Severus would not ignore what had happened. He would hand him over to the British Aurors. Lockhart's mask finally slipped. He fixed Snape with a look of hatred and fury. What do you know? You sanctimonious, hypocritical, shameless man. You said you repented and that you changed in public just to become famous, didn't you? I had to be outstanding, more special. Only then would I prove that I am Lockhart, a genius wizard. Severus listened with cool curiosity. Why must you prove that you're a genius? Lockhart's eyes glinted with raw, brittle intensity. I was the only child in my family with magic. My mother believed that meant I would become extraordinary, so I believed it too. I was supposed to be special. My mother favored me from the moment she found out I had magic. My two older sisters, they were like my father, no magic at all, never touching the magical world. Only my mother and I were alike. Can you imagine the jealous looks from my family? How that fed me? I was unique, clever, handsome, a wizard. Didn't that prove I was outstanding? Then I received my Hogwarts letter. I began to imagine what I would be like there, walking the corridors, everyone whispering about my miraculous power. They'd all see me as a genius and a hero. But when I actually got to Hogwarts, his voice fell. Severus finished the thought for him. You found out you weren't that special. Everyone there had magic. Severus's words ripped open something Lockhart had never healed. He shouted, "Yes, exactly. At Hogwarts, nobody knew my name. My magic was ordinary in a place full of wizards. Nobody was dazzled by my natural wavy blonde hair. That was wrong. I was meant to be admired. That was how my life should have been." Lupin's tone was calm, almost clinical. The professors thought you did quite well. I overheard Professor Flitwick and Professor Slughorn saying so once when I went to have a book slip signed. Quite well, Lockhart screamed, outraged all over again. Quite well. They reduced me to quite well. That's an insult, a negation. I needed to be the best, the only one, the absolute standout, not merely quite well. Lupin stared, suddenly understanding the strange, attention-seeking antics Lockhart had pulled at Hogwarts. So when you realized you couldn't become the sort of wizard who made everyone marvel, you chose shortcuts and publicity stunts? What else? Lockhart replied coldly. I lobbied the headmaster to start a school newspaper. Nothing pleased me more than seeing my name and photo in print. I used magic to carve my name across the Quidditch pitch, each letter 20 feet long, so everyone would know the name Gilderoy Lockhart, even if it meant a week of detention. I mimicked popular effects and projected a huge, glowing portrait of myself into the sky. I sent myself hundreds of Valentine's cards every year until owls filled the Great Hall. People had to remember me. They had to know me. That's the life I should have. Harry and Draco both stared, stunned. Even at their age, they couldn't have imagined anyone so consumed with fame. Draco instinctively edged away, uncomfortable with the obsessive mania Lockhart displayed. Harry felt pity instead. Hearing Lockhart's account, he thought that perhaps, if Lockhart had not grown up with his mother's favoritism and his sister's envy, he might never have become so desperate and shameless. Lockhart's confession lingered in the cabin, a mixture of wounded vanity and calculated performance, leaving a deeper impression than any of his books. Chapter 189, To Albania. In a secluded manor in England, two men sat facing one another in a richly furnished drawing room. One of them could not stop complaining. We've been everywhere, tried everything, but every lead has come up empty, nothing. Dino Perkins' frustration rattled the air. Barty merely smiled and stared at the 35 in his hand, saying nothing. Perkins grew more impatient at his composure. Roll has been missing since the day you left that cavern with this useless 35. Tell me, where did he go? I've answered that question many times. At last, Barty's gaze left the thuf and met Perkins. Perhaps your memory is failing you, or your hearing is at fault. I could excuse you not hearing me before, but let me be clear. This is the last time I answer that question. I sent Roll out of Britain on a top-secret mission concerning our master. He will not return until we have fully welcomed the master back. Perkins locked eyes with him, then looked away within 2 seconds, his shoulders trembling. But he didn't even leave a letter. What do you think we are doing? Barty replied coldly. We're preparing to bring back our master and plunge the magical world back into fear. You think we should be worrying about maintaining unnecessary contact with someone? I didn't mean that, Perkins stammered. But we haven't gained anything in all these days, have we? Worse, we were nearly discovered and hunted down by aurors. And France, it's in chaos. Nicholas Flamel was kidnapped. the French Ministry of Magic was broken into, and Thomas Shafik, he was captured. We all know him. He served by the master's side, and he got taken. The French say those responsible are connected to us. I'm asking, are they really linked to us? Could Black be organizing them? Or Snape? It's very likely Snape. Those French fools are being led by the nose. They're all claiming Flamel was rescued by him. It's a staged show. The ones who broke into the French ministry stole a top-secret file. That was the real goal. Snape got what he wanted and a better reputation for his trouble. He wouldn't do that for no reason. Perkins' indignation spilled over. He's been active while we've achieved nothing, just sitting there staring at that 35 and gaining nothing. Barty tapped the armrest with his fingertips. Perkins had only heard the news. Barty had been tracking the developments longer. At first, he had suspected the French incidents might be a diversion, but when Thomas Shafik was captured, a horde of Inferi assaulted Paris by night, and the 14 was cast, Barty started to doubt. Ever since he had seen the countless Inferi under the water in the cavern where the top 35 was hidden, he knew his great master possessed the means to mass-produce Inferi. The Paris attack matched that capability. If Death Eaters were behind it, who organized them, Black or Snape? If Black were responsible, Barty would have to rethink his impression of that lone escapee. The master must have put him somewhere to be able to organize such an operation. If Snape were behind it, that would prove his public repentance was a sham. His efforts to rehabilitate his image were part of a larger ploy. If Snape had orchestrated the French group, then within days he had extracted what he wanted from the French ministry and bolstered his reputation by rescuing Flamel. Stories of his deeds had spread across the European magical world. Britain, France, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, Switzerland, spurred by Volpe's book and Flamel's influence. The thought chilled Barty. What was Snape building? He gathered the Malfoys, used the same pretext of finding the master to win them over, organized forces in France, and kept spreading his fame across Europe. Power, wealth, prestige. The idea that Snape was no longer loyal to the master made Barty's expression go icily cold. Whatever banner Snape flew now, his actions amounted to abandonment. Perkins was right. While Snape had been active abroad, they had achieved nothing at home. Since sending Roll to secure the 35, Barty had found that unlike the 56, it revealed nothing unusual. He'd also taken Perkins and others across Britain searching for anyone connected to Hepzibah Smith. In the visions Barty had seen after acquiring the 56, there had been a scene where the master obtained a 40 from her. Barty tried to locate that indirectly by finding people tied to Hepzibah, but always came up empty. They couldn't waste more time in Britain. "Pack up," Barty said. "We're leaving for Albania tonight." Perkins rose, bewildered. "Why Albania?" "You don't need to know why." After Lockhart was captured, Andrews, fresh from a walk by the river, returned and asked Severus what to do with the thief. Lockhart had long ago ambushed and altered the memories of many travelers. Severus had already decided he would hand him over to the British Aurors. Let them investigate how many had been harmed and help restore the lost memories. In the original story, Lockhart's memory charm backfired, leaving him with no memory and confined to St. Mungo's, while Dumbledore, Harry, and Ron never exposed his deceit so the victims could be found. Now, with Lockhart in Severus's custody, Severus intended not to be so lenient. He would hand him to Kingsley and let the Aurors handle the aftermath. Andrews spoke up suddenly. "This evening, Lockhart told me something. He said he'd come from the west side of the forest and had wandered into the area cordoned off by Albanian Aurors, the place with the small hill and the dried-up lakeside that the two dragon tamers mentioned." Severus frowned. "That area is cordoned off. How did he get in?" "He said the Aurors made a mistake and let him wander in. Between the hill and the dried-up lake, under a tall but withered 29, he found a 30 with a copper handle." Andrews rubbed his chin. "He even suggested I explore under the 30 with him. Looking back, he must have meant ill." That caught Severus's attention. When he had searched for the ghost of the 40, he'd heard it drift west toward the Dragon Nature Reserve. He'd found no trace in the valley itself and suspected it had headed into the reserve. The dragon's recent unusual movements made the reserve even more suspicious. Even without the 44's ghost, something else had to be there. And did he say anything else? Severus asked. Andrews shook his head. I refused his proposal flatly, so he didn't tell me any more. Severus had Lockhart. He could ask whatever he needed. He walked to the wooden hut built to hold Lockhart. The man started awake from a doze against the wall when Severus entered, staring at him with panic. What are you going to do? Lockhart knew Severus, knew what kind of man his senior was, and terror showed in his voice. He begged for mercy, claiming that if they were back at school and James's gang bullied Severus again, he would surely speak up for him. It was a pathetic attempt. Lockhart had no stomach to offend James's lot or Severus. He had been intimidated by Severus and by Malfoy's crowd since school, and now he had been caught. If Severus decided on harsher measures, Lockhart had nowhere to plead. Severus stood silently for a moment, then spoke softly. I can give you a chance, Lockhart. Lockhart startled. You're gonna let me go? Don't imagine freedom, Severus said, meeting his eyes. But I can let you surrender yourself to the Aurors at the Ministry. If I hand you over directly, given your crimes, they will likely send you to Azkaban. And if you turn yourself in, Lockhart swallowed hard, they might be more lenient, a reduced sentence, comfortable compared to Azkaban. Lockhart had no illusions about Azkaban, its dementors and its horrors. He knew, too, that Severus would not offer a bargain without reason. What do you want from me? Severus leaned forward. Pike told me that before you were caught, you wandered into that abandoned dragon nature reserve. You found a 30 with a copper handle under a 29. What else did you find? I need details. Caught between fear and self-preservation, Lockhart curled inward. He had no desire to lose the rest of his life, a fact that made him cooperative. Aside from the 30 under the 29, I saw lots of dead animals on that hill. Animals? What kind? All kinds. There were 9 in ordinary animals, carrion everywhere. The place was covered in carcasses. Chapter 190, Albanian Aurors. Severus pondered what Lockhart had found. From the description, it did not sound like a place a banshee should appear. Yet the banshee had stayed in this forest searching for something unknown. Given its history, Severus suspected a connection to the dark arts. The Albanian woods were large but not vast. The country's small landmass put a limit on how extensive they could be. If Lord Voldemort was hiding here, any strange occurrence was likely tied to him. After confirming the trapdoor's location with Lockhart, Severus did not linger in conversation. The next morning, he found Andrews and arranged things. Lupin would remain to watch Lockhart. Harry and Draco would stay as well. Severus would contact the Albanian Aurors and uncover the truth about the abandoned nature reserve. Andrews did not object. Severus confirmed with Lupin and the others that they would remain for a few days until he returned, then leave Albania. Harry protested first, eager for an adventure, but Severus would not relent. Wait until you've mastered the spells I taught you, he said, patting Harry on the head. I'll have Lupin check your progress. No slacking. Draco had no problem staying behind, but was bitter that Harry had been allowed to learn spells so early. Once matters were settled, Severus apparated back to the valley. It was filled with dragons, wreckage remained, but there were no trolls fleeing back. He was not surprised. Once the trolls had bolted that night, they had never had the chance to return, torn apart by the frenzied dragons. Severus aimed at the sky and sent up a red spark. The small firework burst over the woods and soon drew the dragon tamers patrolling the reserve. One of them landed nearby on his broom. The dragon riot had clearly put them on edge. "Are you lost, sir?" the man called, not recognizing Severus at first. Severus did not bother to hide his identity. He produced his commissioner's credentials from the British Ministry of Magic's Department of International Magical Cooperation. "I am a commissioner from the British Ministry of Magic, Severus Snape. I need to speak with the Auror in charge here." The tamer stared. After a few seconds, he recovered and gaped. "It's you, Mr. Snape. My God, you're all over the news. The French have been looking for you. I didn't expect you to be here." Severus shrugged. "I'm not exactly a wanted bandit. You're more famous than those wanted men," the tamer said, delighted. "Can I have your autograph? On my robes. Mr. Snape, right here." He thrust a quill into Severus's hand. Severus signed the chest of the tamer's robes without fuss. Now, please take me to your aurors, the tamer beamed. It's an honor. Come, grab my arm, and I'll apparate us to them. Severus took his arm. The tamer waved his wand, and they apparated to a grassy field. Before their feet even touched the ground, a dozen uniformed wizards surrounded them, wands raised. The tamer held up his hands. Wait! We mean no harm. This is Severus Snape, the famous Severus Snape. You've read about him in France. He wants me to take him to you. Some of the aurors looked astonished, but did not lower their wands. A middle-aged wizard who had been approaching stepped forward, Fatos Cabruna, the Albanian auror in charge, the same man who had stopped Lockhart earlier. He, too, recognized Severus from the news. Under the scrutiny of his men, he came up to Severus. Do you have anything to prove your identity, Mr. Snape? Severus handed over his ministry credentials. The ID bore anti-forgery marks. Cabruna examined it, satisfied, and returned it. He extended his hand. Hello, Mr. Severus Snape. Welcome to Albania. I am Fatos Cabruna. The aurors lowered their wands. A few were excited, others merely curious, all staring. The contingent's quality could not match a larger ministry's force. Albanian aurors had not been tempered by years of conflict like Britain's. Severus shook Cabruna's hand. Thank you. I've been in the forest a while. I heard you might be having some trouble. I have found a few things. With aurors present, Severus could no longer investigate privately. It would be problematic to be caught skulking about. There was no need to hide either. Their goals aligned. He had sought out a dragon tamer to bring him to them openly. Cabruna's expression brightened. You have findings? It's not the place to discuss them here, Severus said. If possible, please keep my presence in Albania confidential. If word gets out, the French press will swamp this place, and I suspect you don't want details of what happened at the Fire Dragon Nature Reserve getting out either. Cabruna nodded and instructed the tamer to wait. The tamer left happily with an auror, waving at Severus. The other aurors dispersed to their duties. Cabruna led Severus to the Albanian auror camp, a cluster of tents but far more organized than the one Severus and his group used. Inside, the tents had been arranged into a functional office with cubicles. They went to the last room in the corridor, Cabruna's office. Please tell me in detail what you have discovered, Mr. Snape, Cabruna said, drawing a chair for him. Severus sat and went straight to Lockhart's discovery. In the area you cordoned off, there's a small hill and a lake the dragons have drained, correct? Yes. A British wizard named Gilderoy Lockhart accidentally entered your restricted zone not long ago. After you identified him, you let him go. He later found someone he was looking for, and I happened to be nearby. From Lockhart, I learned of some things he encountered while in the reserve. Cabruna frowned. Lockhart should have reported such findings when he was caught, but now was not the time to dwell on that. Did Mr. Lockhart have any unexpected discoveries? There was a tall, withered fir, Severus said. Do you recall such a tree? Of course, Cabruna said. It was alive at first. After the reserve was designated, a Norwegian ridgeback dug up its roots and killed it. Near that tree, there's a hidden trapdoor. You didn't find it? Cabruna's frown deepened. No, my men have combed that area these past few days and found nothing. Perhaps some kind of concealment enchantment hid it, Severus suggested, to spare the auror's embarrassment. If a fool like Lockhart could find it, how had trained aurors missed it? Cabruna understood and only shook his head. Severus continued, I also have another concern. I'm searching for a free-roaming banshee in this forest. Have you any reports of such an apparition? A banshee? Cabruna considered. We've only been here a few days, so we don't know the woods well. But when we arrived, the dragon tamers mentioned they'd seen a strange spirit float into the Fire Dragon Nature Reserve. Severus's attention sharpened. Strange how? They said it looked like an old hag, like a banshee. About 6 months ago, it entered the reserve and agitated the dragons. The dragon tamers first noticed it then. They tried to drive it away, but the spirit said what it was looking for was here and refused. There wasn't much they could do to a ghost, so they left it be. After 2 or 3 months, it vanished. They thought it had moved on. Only when the dragon trouble began and we arrived did they tell us about it. Cabruna looked at Severus. But we didn't think the ghost was connected to the dragon riot. The trouble in the reserve began 3 years ago, long before the ghost appeared. Severus listened, and then asked his last question, quiet and precise. Did you ever consider that what the ghost was searching for might be related to the trouble in the nature reserve? Chapter 191, The Underground Chamber. The conversation with Cabruna didn't last long. After trading information, the two immediately planned to go to the fir tree to see what was wrong with that mysterious object Lockhart had mentioned. They brought only a small party besides Severus and Cabruna. 2 Albanian aurors accompanied them. Thanks to the clear information Lockhart had given, Severus was the first to see the animal carcasses on the hillside. They bore no wounds, yet they were all dead. "Have you determined the cause of death?" Severus asked. "From the moment we arrived, we sent all the carcasses from this hill back to the ministry for testing and dissection. The ministry's conclusion was that they all died from the same curse." "A curse?" "Yes, a very powerful curse that drained the life from nearly every creature. We couldn't identify it among the known dark arts." Severus crouched over a dead bowtruckle and examined it. "This kind of death is somewhat like the killing curse." "It does appear similar," Cabruna agreed. He tapped the corpse lightly with his wand. The seemingly intact bowtruckle went limp and shriveled. Its insides had long since been hollowed out. "But the effect here is cruder than the killing curse. It ruins the creature's body as if it destroys its organs." Severus looked across the small hill at the spread of corpses. Every kind of magical creature was represented: puffskeins, bundemans, and even dangerous ones like erklings. After studying them a moment, Severus and Cabruna turned to search beneath the fir tree for the thing Lockhart had described. Following Lockhart's directions, the 4 of them combed the area for over 10 minutes but found nothing. It was as if Lockhart had made the whole thing up. Cabruna sighed. "There's nothing here." Severus rubbed his chin and thought back to Lockhart's description. It seemed unlikely Lockhart was lying. He had gone to some trouble to bring this to Andrews and had invited others to investigate. If he were just boasting, why fabricate something so easily verifiable? If Lockhart hadn't lied, why couldn't they find the object now? He compared Lockhart to their own party. Lockhart was a mediocre wizard who'd long since lost finesse in controlling his magic. Cabruna, the 2 aurors, and Severus himself were all experienced, if not elite, then at least well above average. Could the difference be a matter of magical power? Severus reached into his robe and drew a small vial of amber potion. "I have a theory. If whatever's hidden here can only be perceived by less powerful or non-magical folk, it must be keyed to a witch or wizard's magical strength." Cabruna peered at the vial. "What is it?" "A potion that temporarily lowers a wizard's active spellcasting level," Severus said. "The duration depends on the dose. If I drink 1/5 of a pint, the effect will last roughly half a minute." He opened the vial and drank it in one gulp. There were no visible changes, but Severus felt the magic in his body grow chaotic and hard to control. Only his own self-regulation kept it from becoming dangerous. He forced the distraction away and concentrated on the dry grass under the fir tree. Almost immediately, he saw something: a rusty brass handle among the dead grass. Surprised, Cabruna and the others watched as Severus reached into the tangled air. The resistance he felt was real, as if he were pulling against weight. Then came a creak. A black tunnel entrance opened before them, a flight of man-made stone steps descending into a darkness they couldn't see. And then they saw the object Lockhart had described, the small brass handle in Severus's hand. "Just as I thought," Severus said. "A special protective enchantment was applied here. The door was hidden. Only someone with low magical power, or none at all, could perceive its trace. An ordinary wizard would never have found it." Cabruna took a deep breath and made arrangements. "Berisha, go and bring 5 more people." Soon 5 more Albanian aurors arrived. Cabruna stationed 2 of them to guard the entrance, while the rest followed him and Severus down the stairs. All 7 wizards cast illumination spells to light the tunnel. Cabruna led, with Severus and the other aurors following in pairs. The passage was long. At 2 points the tunnel had collapsed. Cabruna's team worked together to clear the rubble. They descended for about an hour before the stairs opened into a vast chamber. Collapsed stone buildings lay scattered, and faint, ancient runes were carved into the surrounding walls. "A wizard once lived here," one of the aurors said, and as if to answer, many torches along the walls flared to life on their own. The green flame they gave off filled the chamber, revealing that the small plaza they stood in was not the end of the way. On the opposite side from the steps, a narrow path led deeper into the complex. Severus glanced up at the ceiling. It lay beyond the reach of the green torchlight, an immense darkness that made it impossible to see what waited above. Raising his wand, its tip glowing with the lighting charm, he could just make out what appeared to be a thick, winding hole in the roof. It wasn't a ladder shaft. There were no rungs or holds, just a long vertical seam that twisted out of sight. "Mr. Snape," Cabruna called, "come here. Look at this." Severus hurried to where Cabruna stood. They walked down the narrow path, lit by torches, until they came upon a stone relief carved into the wall. It depicted a plump bird, perhaps a quail or a fat chicken, eroded by time to a mere suggestion of its original form. "Do you recognize it?" Cabruna asked. Severus studied the carving. Years of weathering had left only the bird's general shape. No. Cabruna had one of the aurors photograph the relief, then they pressed onward. After about 20 minutes, they emerged into a larger chamber and confronted a massive mural. Time had taken its toll. Large sections were damaged, but the painting was still extensive enough that they could make out its whole scene. A man in knight's armor and 3 witches of different styles gathered around a fountain, celebrating. The Albanian aurors were stunned. As locals, they knew the legends of the forest, the fountain of good luck, an almost mythical tale that had driven wizards from many nations to search for it to no avail, now stared at them from the ancient wall. Severus stepped forward and scraped a bit of the mural's pigment from the stone, rolling the lime-stained dust in his hand. "This mural is much older than the 14th century, he said, "probably from somewhere between the 4th and 6th centuries." Cabruna looked up at the painting. Did Beadle record the story after seeing it in some form elsewhere, then include it in his collection? But why would anyone build such a complex underground just to protect a mural? Severus's gaze moved from the central figures to the edges of the mural. Around the knight and witches, the perils described in the fountain's story were faintly depicted. A vast white blind worm, a sheer drop that could stop a heart, a winding river that looped around half the scene. They were smaller and easier to miss, tucked into the margins. He focused on the white worm. Its jaws were open, lined with fangs, but above the mouth there were no other facial features, no eyes. Still, Severus felt a subtle movement where its eyes should have been. Frowning, he raised his wand, its light probing the paint. Under the illumination, the area above the worm's mouth began to twitch. Skin in the mural seemed to shift. The suggestion of eyes was about to become real. Severus's mind flashed back to the great hole in the ceiling, to the fat bird carving, and to the dead animals on the hill. He extinguished his lighting charm and whirled, shouting, "Don't look at the mural! Close your eyes! Everyone, close your eyes!" He was still shouting when, to his horror, the white worm opened a pair of eyes it had no right to have. 3 aurors, Cabruna among them, heard Severus and turned their heads or shut their eyes in time. But 3 others remained frozen, staring directly into those newly formed eyes. In that instant, their breathing, their heartbeats, and their thoughts ceased. Mere eye contact had drained them of life, their bodies falling silent on the stone. The mural trembled, the painted worm bulged outward. Stone cracked as a vast shape pushed through the wall. A snake, no ordinary serpent, but a colossal, unimaginable king of snakes, was breaking free from the ancient masonry. Chapter 192. I am not the traitor, but I killed the traitor France Paris, the Flamel Cottage. In the small garden outside, a large pitch-black dog in a pink dog outfit lay listlessly on the grass, yawning. Nearby, the house elf Chimi pruned the flower bushes. Sirius Black watched the elf from the shadows. He had been at the Flamels for nearly a week. The biggest obstacle to his repeated attempts to get into Flamel's study was that very elf. The Flamel home was protected by explicit alchemical wards. The study and several adjoining rooms required identity verification. If you weren't one of the Flamels, you had no chance. The house elf Chimi was responsible for maintaining the attic's wards. The long wait had made Black restless. He had paid a high price, acting as the Flamel's pet, enduring the humiliation of being dressed up, all to get into that study, and learn where Severus had taken Harry. Tonight, he couldn't wait any longer. He had to risk breaking the study's ward and find any correspondence between Nicholas Flamel and Severus. As dusk fell, Chimmy finished in the garden and went inside to start dinner. Black stayed motionless, watching the attic window where Chimmy lived and where the house's alchemical arrays were centered. Every night, after finishing the chores, Chimmy returned to its nest in the attic and kept the wards active. Black knew he had to strike in the narrow window before the wards were fully renewed. At 6:20 p.m., as always, the Flamels returned. The public attention on the kidnapping had eased somewhat, letting the couple focus on other magical world aid projects. While they ate, Black slipped into the cottage. He wasn't at the table, but his bowl contained the same food as the Flamels. They had wanted to name him. A few days ago, Perenelle had suggested many names: Baker, Mars, and Nicholas finally settled on the simple Noir. The past few days had been easy in small ways. Nicholas took him on leashed walks each morning and evening. When they first put the collar on, Black had wanted to struggle. But when the old man patted his head and soothed him, Black submitted. He needed to play the part of a good dog to achieve his goal. After dinner, Nicholas clipped on the leash and took Black out as usual. When they returned and the Flamels went to bed, Black waited in his nest until the lights were out, then moved. In the dark, he was ghost-like, slipping up the stairs to the attic. Chimmy had not yet come back. There was still cleaning in the kitchen, but it didn't keep him waiting long. About 20 minutes later, Chimmy apparated into the attic, pleased with its day, and was about to light the lamp and straighten its pillowcase when a spell struck it. Imperio. Black had shifted back into human form in the darkness and cast the imperious curse. Ambushed, Chimmy had no resistance. Its wide eyes went hollow. "Open the alchemical seal on the study," Black said quietly. Under the curse, Chimmy lifted a finger. House elves did not need wands to work magic. The gesture was enough. Runes lit up across the attic walls, blinked, and the restriction on the study lifted with ease. When the task was done, Chimmy stood dazed and vacant, like a machine that had run out of instructions. Black whispered, "I'm sorry," then stupefied the elf into a deep sleep. Without further hesitation, he became the dog again, left the attic, and found the study, separated from the Flamels' bedroom by a single wall. Outside the door, he shifted back into human form, turned the knob, and opened the study. The house was old. The hinges complained in the silent corridor with a faint creak. He slipped inside and closed the door softly. Instead of lighting the lamp, he cast a low, controlled lumos and rifled through the desk drawers and piles of letters. Nicholas Flamel, a renowned figure in the magical world, received many letters. Black found a dedicated chest of drawers and spent an hour going through it, but there was no correspondence about Severus. Panic rose. If Flamel had no clue, he had run out of leads entirely. Frustrated, he went to the shelves and began searching without care, not bothering to restore the disordered books. Before he could make much of a mess, a gentle, amused voice from the doorway stopped him. "Please don't ruin my carefully ordered bookshelf, Mr. Black. You've already been through my letters. There's nothing for you there." Black's whole body froze. He spun, wand up, and found the stooped old man standing in the doorway. Nicholas merely waved at the pointed wand, closed the study door behind him with a calm movement, and switched on the lamp. "Don't make such a fuss. Perenelle is asleep. Don't wake her." Black's breathing quickened. He was exposed. His greatest asset in escaping Azkaban and hiding from the Aurors, being an unregistered animagus, was known to Nicholas Flamel. If the Flamels reported him, the Aurors would swarm him, and he would never shake them off. A chaotic flood of choices surged through him. Knock Nicholas down and obliviate him, flee France immediately, or try to talk his way out. Nicholas met his panic without surprise. "You could overpower me and run, forcing the Aurors into the usual chase," Nicholas said quietly. "But is that what you want, Sirius Black? To run forever with nothing to show for it?" His words stabbed. Under the lamp's dim light, the two pairs of eyes locked. At last, Black rasped, "What do you want? To persuade me to go to the Aurors and turn myself in?" Nicholas pulled out a chair and gestured for Black to sit. "If you want to leave, leave. I won't waste my breath trying to force you to surrender. Sit and talk instead. Misunderstandings are cleared by conversation." Black hesitated, then sank into the chair across from him. "Why would you want to talk to a criminal like me?" he asked, tone edged. "Why are you looking for Severus Snape?" Nicholas asked softly. "Why find him? Haven't you read the French papers? They denounce him as a betrayer. I resent him for betraying my master. I should want him found for revenge." Black's answer was half sarcasm, half anger. Nicholas shook his head. "I don't think that's the whole truth." Black stared, incredulous. Since his imprisonment and the massacre on that street, 13 muggles dead, Peter's supposed murder, no one had dared doubt the official story. For Dumbledore to have believed otherwise was one thing, but for an ancient alchemist living in France, who had never seen the events in Britain, to suspect his innocence was almost absurd. Yet a strange, small hope reared within him. "On what basis?" he demanded. Nicholas smiled. "If you were truly the monster the papers describe, you wouldn't have been in that subway station drinking with a muggle vagrant when I found you. Being an animagus changes your shape, not your feelings. The regret and sorrow in your eyes then were real. There's more to your story, isn't there?" Black blinked. He hadn't expected the old man to remember that night. Nicholas continued. He had had his suspicions from the first day, later spoke with Dumbledore and learned enough to deduce more, and tonight he'd finally confirmed his guess. Black swallowed. He had come to the Flamels as a last hope, and Nicholas had clearly held his peace until he could confront him directly, rather than immediately summoning the Aurors. The silence stretched. Black's hands curled into fists. He kept his eyes down, unwilling to show his turmoil. 10 minutes passed before he finally met Nicholas's gaze and spoke, voice low and steady. "I am not the traitor," he said, "but I killed the traitor." Chapter 193. The Basilisk. Although Nicholas had never taken part in the events that had once shaken Britain, he knew the broad outlines from countless sources. Most of what he knew came from his much younger friend Albus Dumbledore. As a direct participant in that fierce conflict, Dumbledore naturally knew secrets outsiders could never guess, and whenever something worried him, he wrote to Nicholas for advice. So Nicholas understood the prophecy, how the Potters had hidden, how Lord Voldemort had tracked them down, and whom the public believed had betrayed them. But now Sirius Black was about to tell him a story of betrayal and loyalty that bore no resemblance to the public version. Black had meant to carry his secret to the grave and never breathe a word to anyone. Yet these last days of chasing Severus and Harry, always a step behind, had torn him apart. As Nicholas had predicted, Black could not bear to return to France empty-handed after wasting so much time and taking so many risks. How much of his confession was driven by a hidden hope that someone, anyone, might finally see his innocence, he could not say. In the quiet study, Black poured out the truth of that long-ago betrayal. He told how the Potters had first chosen him as their secret keeper, and how, in what he had thought a cunning ruse, he had shifted the role to Peter Pettigrew. He convinced no one would suspect the change. Peter, he insisted, was the real traitor. Fear of Voldemort had driven Peter to kneel and become one of the Dark Lord's servants. The moment Peter became secret keeper, he betrayed the Potter's hiding place to Voldemort. Then came the night of slaughter. When Black learned the truth, he hunted Peter like a man possessed. In the chase, Peter unleashed a devastating dark curse that obliterated a street and killed 13 muggles. Later, he vanished under one of Black's spells, leaving only a single severed finger behind. After that revenge, Black could not forgive himself. He did not protest when the Aurors took him, and he never appealed when Barty Crouch Sr., head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, threw him into Azkaban for life without trial. Not long ago, on the day the maimed werewolf, Fenrir Greyback, was locked in Azkaban, Black had heard about Severus's recent actions in the wizarding world and discovered that he had taken Harry Potter. "He can never have repented," he spat. By the end of his confession, Black was half out of his chair. He had told Nicholas everything and desperately wanted to be believed. "I saw through that Snevolus from the day we started school. He was rotten to the core. He ran with the same vicious crowd as my brother. James's wife, Lily, had been his friend once." He went on. "She begged him again and again to stop dabbling in the dark arts, and all he did was sneer and call her a mudblood. A man like that doesn't suddenly see the light. He was Voldemort's most devoted dog, the finest actor alive. He fooled Dumbledore. He fooled the British Ministry of Magic. He fooled Harry. He fooled Remus. He fooled you. He fooled everyone. Black's face flushed. He stared at Nicholas in fervent appeal and then fell silent, having emptied his heart. All he wanted now was for the 600-year-old wizard to believe him, not for absolution, but so Nicholas would help find Severus and Harry. Nicholas folded his hands and thought for a dozen silent seconds before he spoke. My opinion of Severus Snape differs from yours. Black started, unable to hide the shock. How? I never met the teenage Severus, but the man I met in Paris was not the consummate actor you describe, hiding unspeakable crimes beneath a mask. Disappointment swept across Black's face. He could not fathom what potion Severus had fed the world that even Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel believed him. Just as Black's hope began to sink and he rose to leave, Nicholas's next words lifted his head. But regarding the tale you have told, specifically that Peter Pettigrew was the betrayer, I believe you, Mr. Black. The room held its breath for several heartbeats. Black swallowed the surge of gratitude and snapped. What good is believing that if you still think Snape is some reformed saint? Is the boy you say travels with him, Harry Potter, disguised as Dudley Dursley? Nicholas asked calmly. Something in the old man's composure steadied Black. He forced himself to speak evenly. Yes, Severus hid the scar and changed the color of his eyes. He should have Lily's bright green gaze. You've accused Severus of keeping Harry close to persecute him and take revenge on his parents. I read the letter Draco Malfoy sent his family. Black's voice rose again. He boasted in detail how Severus beat Harry and made him cower. It's true. Every word. Nicholas merely shook his head. Severus and Remus brought the two boys to visit me. They were both kind to the children, and Harry didn't look mistreated. So I still can't reconcile the man I know with the one you describe. But I've always believed the best way to clear up a misunderstanding is to talk. Black, simmering with frustration over Nicholas's distrust, snapped his head up. Talk? I don't even know where they are. Nicholas read the hope in his eyes and only smiled. Black caught something in that smile, his ragged breathing stilled. Nicholas added, Actually, I don't know where they've gone either. Bang! A chair clattered to the floor as Black leapt up. You're toying with me. Nicholas laughed like an old child and waved a hand. Easy. My story isn't finished. I truly don't know their location, but I can help you find them, provided you agree to one thing. Black, used to the infuriating games of famous old wizards, Albus Nicholas, forced down his anger. What thing? Hand over the wand you took from that Auror lady. I'll lead you to Severus and the others, but first, you and he must all sit down and talk. If the conversation proves you right, I will stand by you. If it proves you wrong, you will listen to me. Nicholas's terms left Black silent for a long moment. Seeing no better option, he lifted his head. So long as your promise holds, I agree. Nicholas smiled and gestured toward the bookcase behind Black. An old parchment fluttered down into his hand. Finding Severus is easier than you think. Haven't you noticed? Wherever he goes, something major follows. Black's face darkened at the name, then softened with curiosity as Nicholas unrolled the parchment. A hand-drawn map of Europe, its ink faded. A bead of silvery liquid, like mercury, shimmered and flowed across its surface. As Nicholas spread the sheet, the bead split into countless droplets. The silver motes skittered across the map until the largest pooled over a region of Albania. The biggest droplet burst, and above the parchment, a silver image flared into life. It was a scene, a fresco that showed a knight and 3 witches dancing in jubilation around a spring. The vision shifted, and they watched instead a narrow, torchlit passage in which Severus stood with his eyes averted. Behind him, Cabruna and 3 Albanian aurors obeyed his warning and spun to flee. But when they neared the narrow tunnel they had come through, Severus stopped them. We can't go back that way. The space is too tight. If the creature behind us is faster, we'll be trapped without room to cast. It will slaughter us all. Cabruna tried to apparat, only to find the underground chamber warded against it. No retreat, no apparition. Escape was impossible. Then we have no choice but to kill it, one of the aurors said. Severus moved quickly. He tore a strip from his robe and blindfolded himself. Cover your eyes. Do not look. It's a basilisk. A reeking stench rose and made every hair on Severus's head stand up. He barked a spell straight toward the smell. Bombarda Maxima! Boom! A blast of scorching fire erupted just ahead. In the darkness behind his blindfold, the basilisk, jaws opening to swallow, took the explosion full in its mouth. The creature was forced back. Its unarmored throat bled foul black blood. The wound only enraged the colossal white serpent more. It thrashed and recoiled, its body, far larger than even the biggest dragon, a Ukrainian iron belly, shook the ground like an earthquake. Amid the convulsions, one blindfolded Albanian auror tried a spell toward the sound. The curse struck the basilisk's scales and dissipated without effect. The attempt only drew the creature's attention. With impossible speed, the serpent struck. The auror felt a reeking wind, and then the sensation of being fed into a grinder, razor fangs tearing him like cloth. There was no scream, only the wet, sickening crunch of bone and flesh. The air filled with the reek of fresh blood. Severus knew then, the basilisk had dwelt in the chamber too long and grown beyond the reach of ordinary spells. Unless they resorted to certain special, unspeakable curses. Chapter 194, The Killing Curse. Don't move, stay where you are. At that moment, Severus, who had been blindfolded, tore the cloth away from his face. His timing was perfect. The basilisk had just swallowed one of the aurors and was lifting its massive head to gulp again. Its deadly eyes were still fixed on the ceiling above. Severus leveled his wand at the underside of the basilisk's jaw, a clearly softer, more vulnerable spot. Then he spoke the unforgivable curse in a voice that cut through the rubble-strewn chamber. Avada Kedavra. A sickly green light erupted from the tip of his wand, bathing the underground room in a deathly glow. Cabruna and the other auror stood frozen, faces drained of color. The basilisk, having only just swallowed an Albanian auror, sensed the threat. It let out a sharp hiss and twisted its body violently to avoid the spell, but a fired curse travels faster than even the fastest serpent. The green beam struck the creature squarely beneath the jaw. The shaking earth stilled. The thunder of the basilisk's tail slamming the stone walls stopped as if cut off. Motion in the cramped space dropped to absolute silence in an instant. Then something huge crashed to the floor with a bone-rattling boom, and dust that had begun to settle was thrown up again. Tergio. Severus flicked his wand. A gust of air swept the yellow-gray dust aside, revealing the wrecked chamber. Cabruna opened his eyes. Blood and shredded flesh lay everywhere. The basilisk itself, pure white, now lay lifeless on the floor. The Albanian head of aurors stared at the carnage, grief and horror mingling in his face. The auror who had drawn the basilisk's attention and been swallowed was gone. Nothing of him remained. The shredded remains scattered across the floor were those of the three aurors who had met the eyes painted on the mural and died instantly, then been crushed by the beast's enormous body. There were hardly any intact remains left. As a small ministry, Albania struggled to train and keep even a handful of aurors. In one afternoon, 4 of them had been lost. Cabruna forced himself to compose his expression. He ordered his one surviving subordinate back to the surface to bring reinforcements, then turned to Severus, who was already studying the basilisk's corpse. "Ordinary people can't channel a killing curse with that kind of power," he said, his voice a mixture of suspicion and bewilderment. Severus glanced up from the corpse. He wasn't surprised. This was the kind of remark he'd been expecting. The dark arts take their name from what they do. They require a depth of malice and intent most wizards can't summon. Repeatedly using such spells hardens a person's heart. Life becomes cheap, harming others easier. Most ordinary wizards, even if they know the incantation for Avada Kedavra, simply cannot perform it properly. At best, a miscast unforgivable might cause a nosebleed. Some can't even manage that. The basilisk before them was no ordinary conjuration. Basilisks live extraordinarily long lives. Legend has it the first lived 900 years. Judging by the size of this one, it was older than that, perhaps much older. It had molted countless times and had shed its original emerald scales to become pure white. Those molts endowed its skin with magical resistance that surpassed even dragons and trolls. Even a powerful killing curse aimed at a weak point might only stun such a creature, yet Severus's curse had felled it at once. Cabruna, a professional auror, felt uneasy. It was one thing to face a killer snake. It was another to watch a man perform magic, the likes of which were associated with the most notorious dark wizards. Severus shrugged and replied casually, "I'm not exactly ordinary, am I? The papers have been very busy lately. They've dug up plenty on my past. Some of it's nonsense, some of it true. I used to be a dark wizard, after all. It's only logical I'd be proficient with the killing curse." Cabruna exhaled, uncertain how to counter a statement that sounded reasonable on the surface, but avoided the deeper implications. Severus had already turned back to the basilisk, waving his wand to extract one of the great fangs. "Stop obsessing over the killing curse, Mr. Cabruna," Severus said. "If I were someone who abused the dark arts, I wouldn't have hesitated at the first sign of danger. I wouldn't have told you to stay put to avoid friendly fire. I would have cast straight away. Or perhaps Albanian law is different. Is it illegal here to use unforgivable curses even on dangerous creatures?" Cabruna, who had once helped draft Albania's magical statutes, shook his head. "No, the unforgivable curses are prohibited against humans only. In Auror training, they use animals to demonstrate the dangers and limits of those spells." "Then help me," Severus said. "I only want one fang, a pint of venom, and a pint of blood. The rest is yours." Cabruna hesitated for a heartbeat, then stepped forward and helped harvest what Severus requested. When they were done, their attention turned to the mural, curiously unscathed despite the violence of what had occurred. Severus studied the spot in the mural where the basilisk had opened its eyes and emerged, the place where the eyeless, giant white earthworm had been in the tale. The earthworm's head was gone, replaced by a black, bottomless hole, clearly the tunnel the basilisk had used. It was more than 5 feet across. "There must be another passage here," Severus said. "A basilisk wouldn't just sit frozen in a cramped hole all day." Cabruna had considered the same thing, but he was hesitant to press forward without more help. "Should we wait for reinforcements?" Severus looked at him. "This tunnel is narrow. If there is trouble, extra bodies won't help. There's nowhere to maneuver. And you saw what just happened. The ordinary Aurors were useless except to get themselves killed." Cabruna clenched his jaw. "Fine. Then the two of us will go and see what's down there. Whatever needs a basilisk that old to guard it must be important." Severus was already moving. He reached the mural and crawled into the tunnel the basilisk had used. It was barely over 5 feet in diameter. He had to hunch to move. The scent inside was the same pungent, sickly stench that clung to the dead creature. He covered his nose instinctively and raised his wand. "Lumos," he muttered, and the tip of his wand gleamed. Cabruna followed. He was shorter than Severus, but still had to stoop to advance. "Did it use this tunnel as its latrine?" he asked, eyebrows knit against the smell. Severus's light revealed scores of scratch marks along the ceiling where the basilisk had slid. The wizard who made this basilisk ordered it to guard this place. There appears to be a passage to the surface by the small plaza outside for it to hunt, but it spent most of its time down here. They walked for about 10 minutes before the tunnel was blocked. A massive shedskin filled the passage. "My God," Cabruna breathed. Even having seen the basilisk, the shedskin was enormous, bigger than the creature itself. And there wasn't just one. They had been deliberately gathered and stacked, filling the tunnel with layer upon layer of molted hide like a clogged throat. "It hid its molts here," Severus said. "More than one. It intentionally blocked the way with its shed skins to prevent anyone from entering while it was away." Cabruna swallowed. "What do we do?" Severus rolled up his sleeves. "A nuisance, but at least it's right here. We've come this far. We're not turning back over some skins." "Step back a little," he instructed. Cabruna obeyed and took a few cases. Severus left himself a safe distance, then raised his wand and paused as if recalling something. "Fiend fire isn't outlawed in Albania, is it?" Cabruna blinked. "What? Ordinary fire won't get through those hides. We need something a bit more forbidden." He didn't speak the incantation aloud. With a controlled flick, he cast non-verbally. A clump of deep red fire sprang into being, then coalesced into the shape of a wolf made of flame. It bounded forward and pounced on the pile of skins. Basilisk hide, despite its magical resilience, melted under the fiend fire as if it were butter on a hot griddle. The molt collapsed to ash beneath the ravenous flames, and a blast of heat swept back toward them as the fire burned outward. Cabruna stared at the back of Severus's head, feeling his senses go numb. He recognized the spell, Fiendfire, a high-level dark arts conjuration. Summoning it was one thing, controlling it was another entirely. Most wizards struggled a lifetime to master it. Most never could. The way Severus had summoned and contained it, the audacity and precision of it, left Cabruna with a sick, disbelieving sense that if Severus turned and admitted to being Lord Voldemort himself, he would not be surprised. The Fiendfire cleared a lane. Severus began walking forward, the glow from his wand throwing their long shadows ahead. Noticing Cabruna lingering, he called over his shoulder, "Don't be afraid, I'm leading. The dust is blowing in toward us, good sign. We're not far from the end of this tunnel." Chapter 194, The Killing Curse. Everyone, don't move, stay where you are. Severus, who had been blindfolded, ripped the cloth from his face at that moment. He had seized the perfect instant. The basilisk had just swallowed an auror whole and was rearing its massive head to gulp him down. Its eyes, lethal to anyone who met their gaze, were still fixed on the ceiling above. Severus raised his wand, aiming for the basilisk's lower jaw, a spot noticeably softer and more vulnerable than the rest. Then he spoke the unforgivable curse. Avada Kedavra! A sickly green light blasted from the tip of Severus's wand. The glow filled the underground chamber, casting a pallid sheen over Cabruna and the other man who stood frozen. The basilisk, which had just swallowed an Albanian auror, immediately sensed the lethal threat. It hissed sharply and twisted frantically to dodge, but its speed could not outmatch the spell already shot from Severus's wand. The green beam struck the basilisk's vulnerable lower jaw directly. The trembling ground stilled. The thunder of the basilisk's tail slamming the stone walls stopped. In an instant, the cramped space shifted from violent motion to absolute stillness. Then something enormous hit the floor with a deafening crash. Dust that had been settling swirled back into the air. "Scourgify," Severus muttered. A gust from his wand swept the gray-yellow dust aside and revealed the devastation of the chamber. Cabruna opened his eyes. Blood and chunks of flesh littered the floor. The basilisk lay dead, a vast, pure white serpent. The Albanian auror supervisor's face was stricken as he looked at the grisly remains of his men. The auror who had been noticed by the basilisk for casting spells was already gone without a trace. 3 others who had looked into the creature's eyes at the wrong time lay dismembered and crushed where the beast had rolled. There were almost no intact bodies to be seen. Albania had never had the resources to train aurors to the standards of larger countries. 4 officers lost in a single day was a devastating blow, but Cabruna forced himself to pull together quickly. He ordered his only surviving subordinate to return immediately to the surface and fetch reinforcements. Then he turned to Severus, who was examining the basilisk's corpse. "Ordinary people can't unleash a killing curse like that," he said, voice threaded with something like wariness. Severus looked up from the corpse and met Cabruna's eyes. He was not surprised by the comment. The dark arts were called such for a reason. Spells meant to harm or kill require the caster to summon a deep, sustained malice. Repeated use of dark arts only made that malice come more easily, until the caster came to see life as cheap and killing as trivial. In the magical world, those who mastered the dark arts were almost always dark wizards. Most ordinary witches and wizards, even if they knew the words and movements of the killing curse, couldn't muster the intent necessary for it to work. At best, it might cause a nosebleed, sometimes not even that. This basilisk was no common creation. Basilisks live extraordinarily long lives. The earliest tales speak of the first living for over 900 years. Judging by its size, this one had to be centuries old, having shed its skin countless times. Where a basilisk's hide should be emerald, this creature's had gone pure white through repeated sloughing. Those many cycles had made its skin's magical resistance exceed that of dragons and trolls. Even striking a vulnerable spot, an ordinary practitioner's killing curse would likely only enrage such a beast, not fell it outright. Yet Severus had killed it in a single stroke, something even the most notorious dark wizards rarely achieved. Cabruna, trained and hardened as an auror, couldn't help feeling uneasy. Severus shrugged. "I'm not exactly ordinary, am I? The papers haven't failed to notice my recent exploits. They've dug up plenty from my younger years, some nonsense, some not so nonsense." I used to be a dark wizard after all. It's not surprising I can cast the killing curse. Cabruna drew a breath and didn't know how to answer. Severus's explanation sounded plausible at first, but the longer one thought about it, it was twisted nonsense. Severus had already turned back to the basilisk and was trying to pry the creature's massive fangs free with his wand. Enough about the killing curse, Severus said. If I were the sort to revel in it, I wouldn't have hesitated. I wouldn't have told you all to stay put to avoid collateral damage. I would have just cast it. Or does Albanian law forbid unforgivable curses on dark creatures? He added dryly. Cabruna, who had drafted Albania's magical law, shook his head. No, unforgivable curses are banned for use on humans only. In Auror training, they sometimes use animals to demonstrate the danger of those curses. Then don't stand there, Severus said. Help me. I only want one fang, a pint of venom, and a pint of serpent blood. Everything else is yours. Cabruna hesitated, then stepped forward to help Severus extract the fang, the venom, and the blood. When that was done, their attention turned to the wall where the basilisk had opened its eyes and emerged, the very place the story once described as the lair of a monstrous eyeless white worm. What had been the worm's snarling mouth was now gone, replaced by a dark, 5-foot-wide hole, clearly the hole the basilisk had been dwelling in. There must be another passage, Severus said. It couldn't have stayed cooped up in a cramped hole every day. Cabruna had thought that too, but he was reluctant to press further. Shouldn't we wait for reinforcements? Severus glanced at him. This hole is narrow. If we meet danger, no matter how many people are down here, there won't be room to maneuver. And you saw with that basilisk, ordinary Aurors in those conditions only get themselves killed. They're not much help. Cabruna ground his teeth. Then the two of us go in first. We should see what needs a basilisk guarding it, and why. Severus had already moved ahead. He crouched and climbed into the tunnel the basilisk had used. The passage was just over 5 feet high, less than 6, so he bent over as he went. A foul stench hit him immediately, and he covered his nose. He raised his wand and cast Lumos. Cabruna followed, shorter but still forced to stoop. Did it even relieve itself down here? Cabruna muttered, frowning at the reek. Severus's wand light revealed long, glossy marks on the tunnel ceiling where the serpent had slithered. Whoever created this basilisk ordered it to stand guard here. I found its hunting route out to the little plaza above, but it spent most of its time in this tunnel. About 10 minutes in, something enormous blocked their path. My goodness, Cabruna breathed. A massive pile of shed skins filled the passage. Even after seeing the basilisk, the mound of molts was larger than the beast itself. Dozens, maybe hundreds, piled and compacted. The passage was completely blocked. Severus deduced immediately, it did this on purpose. It deliberately piled its shed skins to seal the passage while it was away. Cabruna hesitated. What do we do now? Severus rolled up his sleeves. Annoying, but at least it's right here. We've come this far. Are we really going to turn back because of a pile of skin? Step back a little, he told Cabruna. They retreated a few paces, then Severus raised his wand. He paused as if recalling something. In Albania, that forbidden fire isn't illegal, is it? Cabruna blinked. What? Ordinary fire won't burn these skins. We need a forbidden power. Severus flicked his wand without speaking. A cluster of deep red flames sprang into being, moving with a life of its own. The fire shaped itself into a snarling, wolf-like form and pounced on the pile of shed skins. Those resistant hides, their magical resilience honed over centuries, melted away under the fiend fire as if butter on a hot pan. The skins disintegrated into ash, which the heat blew back along the tunnel towards Severus and Cabruna. The blast of scorching air warmed Cabruna's face. His eyes went wide as he recognized the spell. Fiend fire. An advanced dark arts curse, easier to spark than to control, and deadly in its indiscriminate, consuming fury. Most wizards never learned it, and even fewer could keep it focused with the precision Severus showed. Cabruna stared at the back of Severus's head as the ashes blew inward. The sight made him feel oddly numb. If Severus now turned and announced he was Lord Voldemort returned, the shock would be strangely muted. As the fiend fire cleared the way, Severus moved forward again. He looked back at Cabruna, who had stopped a step behind him, and called over his shoulder. Don't be afraid. The ashes blowing inward mean we're near the tunnel's exit.